What's up? Ghost Fictions is here, and we're back again. This is a story where Izuku had an elemental quirk and got a harem. Izuku had given up on trying to be a hero after so many years of being discouraged. On one fateful night, he comes across a rather strange-looking medallion. This strange medallion, however, was no ordinary accessory, as it contained the power to control the elements, and they have chosen him to be the hero he was always destined to become. But before we start, please consider subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Don't forget to check the description for more informations and support the amazing author Shadow K54. Now, let's get into the story. Chapter 1. The Elemental Medallion. Thank you, please come again. A 17-year-old Izuku Midoriya spoke a polite farewell to a customer who had just left the convenience store where he worked. At this point in his life, he had been working as a cashier at the place for about a year now. No, this isn't how he imagined his life being, sadly. His whole life, all he ever dreamed about was becoming a hero. A hero who, with a positive smile, can spark hope within the hearts of the innocent. Just like his idol, All Might, the muscle-bound #1 hero who had been the one to spark hope within Izuku's own heart when he was just a little boy. Unfortunately, his chances, his dreams of being a hero were crushed when, at a young age, he was diagnosed as quirkless. Quirks, according to society nowadays, are the only things that one is required to have in order to be a hero. They can also be referred to as superpowers. However, instead of calling them that, the world has opted to dub them quirks. Despite Izuku's parents having their own distinct quirks, as does about 80% of the world's population, he had never inherited any of them. His mother's quirk allows her to levitate small objects towards her, while his father, who is no longer with them due to an untimely plane crash that occurred during one of his seemingly everlasting business trips, was able to breathe fire. In the past, he had planned to go to UA High, the most well-known and prestigious academy for aspiring young heroes who are looking to start their journey to becoming one, but that plan was disintegrated into nothingness when his own idol, the man he always looked up to and who had inspired him to keep on pursuing his dream despite his quirklessness, told him that he couldn't be hero without a quirk, that he was chasing something that he could never hope to reach without having a power of some sort. All Might wasn't that harsh about it, but to Izuku, that was basically what he said. After countless times of hearing other people put him down, such as his childhood former friend Katsuki Bakugo, who Izuku hadn't seen or talked to since he got accepted into UA, he finally gave up and accepted what was reality before him at the time. Izuku was depressed to say the least for a long while after he did, but it was only a matter of time before he got back on his feet so he can start living his life any way he can. It couldn't be helped that he had no quirk. And it took quite a bit of pulling together for him to truly accept that fact and move on with his life. So with that in mind, instead of trying to apply for any hero schools, he stuck to doing normal schooling and continued on with life from there. When he turned 16, he got a part-time job at the convenience store to help out his mother with bills and other expenses. Since his father was gone, there wasn't much income flowing in as it used to. His mother had a job as a child care provider at a local daycare near their home, which thankfully had a pretty decent pay. Izuku's shift ended at 9 o'clock, which was around the time where the sun would start to slowly fall over the horizon. He went to the break room to punch out for the day and went to his locker to take out his dark green hoodie, his wallet and home keys. Since he was the last to leave, he was tasked with locking up the store before heading home, which he didn't complain about. After shutting off the lights, he went outside to gate and lock up the front entrance before making his way home. For a shortcut, Izuku would cut through a bush trail of a lightly forested area in a park that was close to his home. "Hey mom, as usual, just calling to let you know that I'm heading home now. You get back okay?" Izuku asked in concern as he was on the phone with Inko. "Okay, please do be careful, Izuku," Inko uttered anxiously on the other end of the call. "I seriously can't help but worry whenever you walk home so close to nighttime, and yes, I got home just fine, thank you." "Okay, good." He sighed in relief at her answer. "Don't worry, I'll be fine. I've been walking the same path for a year now and nothing dangerous has ever happened. You say this every evening, I swear." He joked with a light chuckle. "You can't blame me. You're my baby and I'm always going to be worrying about you. And don't you be trying to get snippy with me there, young man." The woman huffed before breaking into a fit of light giggling. Despite all of the pain that they had endured after the loss of Hisashi, it only aided on bringing them closer together, pairing and understanding one another more when it came to each other's humor. "But still, be careful, my son." Her voice softened. "I'll let you go now. I don't want to distract you more than I already have. I'll see you soon. I love you." "I will, Mom. I love you too. See you in a bit." With that, Izuku ended the call before putting his phone back in his right pants pocket and hiding his hands within his sweater pockets. He smiled as he now allowed the calming sounds of nature around him soothe his being. As he was walking along the trail, Izuku suddenly stopped in his tracks and shrieked in surprise when he saw a squirrel pop out of a bush and was about to cross the path in front of him. In its little hands, the critter was holding what looked to be a small round silver object that had a pure white gem in the middle of it and a thin silver chain attached to the top of it. Its buck teeth was nibbling on the object's reflective and unscratchable metal exterior. When hearing the squirrel was just as startled as it squeaked and jumped in alarm, dropping the small object before dashing away to hide within the bushes once more. Izuku's heart felt like it was thumping at 1,000 beats per minute as he leaned forward, bringing one hand to a knee while his other hand went to his chest. "Gosh, you scared me too, little buddy." He panted softly with an awkward grin as he allowed his lungs to gain back their oxygen. With his stamina regained, Izuku's eyes narrowed as he stared curiously at the object that the squirrel had dropped while walking towards it, getting a more clear view of it the closer he got. He knelt down and picked up the object with his index finger and thumb before bringing it up close to his face to really get a good look at it. His other hand moved to hold up the chain above it as his thumb rubbed off some of the dirt that littered the gemstone as it caught his undivided attention for a moment. After the moment, he began to take in more of the medallion's features. There was curvy lining going around the gem, and above the lining was what looked to be a red flame, a navy water droplet, a baby blue snowflake, a green gust of wind, a brown mountain top, a purple lightning bolt, a black crescent moon and a yellow sun with wavy thick lines going out of it. All of these symbols were going around the gem in that order, with the red flame being the one on top. "Well, this thing looks pretty neat," he reviewed to himself as he stood back on his feet and held onto the medallion by its chain alone, letting it hang in front of him. He went back to gazing at the gemstone, in astonishment this time around however. "I wonder who it belongs to though." He was allowed to ponder on the thought for only a second before he gasped in alarm, and his eyes went wide when he noticed the gem suddenly start to glow brightly. "You have been chosen." Just as soon as it glowed, Izuku heard a deep booming voice echo around him, causing him to become startled as he began to look at his surroundings frantically. This time, it now felt as if his heart was going at 1,000,000 beats per minute. "Who's there?" he shouted as he saw nothing but trees, plants and bushes around him. But seeing nothing out of the ordinary, Izuku looked back down to the pendant in his hand. Now he was rendered even more confused when the glowing on the gem was no longer active. Wasn't it just? He was speechless to say the least. Has he suddenly gone mad and imagined the whole thing? He couldn't have though. The voice, the glow. They sounded and looked so real. "I must not be getting much sleep," he stated to himself with a nervous chuckle as he looked at the medallion cautiously, replaying the loud words that were said to him in his head. Not looking forward to any more weird activity that may occur with the object, Izuku turned around and put it back on the ground before stepping away slowly. Wouldn't want to take what belongs to the squirrel. He scoffed anxiously as he quickly turned on one foot and began to jog away from the strange jewel. It was dark by the time Izuku had gotten out of the bush trail. He cut through a small open field of the park before walking a crosswalk in the middle of a road, and he needed to cut through a few alleys, which were also shortcuts he knew, before reaching home. Why the hell did it sound like something was talking to me? I swear that the gem was glowing too. The voice. What did it mean by when it said "you have been chosen"? Was I really just hearing things? It didn't seem like it. Izuku muttered while holding onto his chin. His mind was currently at work on trying to make sense of what had happened minutes earlier, but to so far no avail. As always when he silently ranted to himself, he was completely unaware of his surroundings. Click. He stopped stiffly in his tracks when he heard a rather recognizable and life-threatening sound hit his ears from behind him. His expression quickly showed fear as he processed the noise. That S sounded like a. With extreme hesitation, Izuku slowly turned his head to look over his shoulder. What awaited his sights behind him immediately made his heart drop and his stomach turn. Behind him was a man wearing a sports cap, a black bandana around the lower half of his face, a white hoodie, navy jeans and white runners. In his hand and pointing at the boy was a snub-nosed revolver. Izuku was absolutely petrified as he was staring down the barrel of the locked and loaded firearm. He swears that he could see a bullet waiting to be shot at the end of the tiny tunnel. The gunman chuckled ominously before speaking up. "Now, I'm pretty sure that you know what's expected of you when facing a situation like this, eh kid? You don't look like a stupid one to me. If you do it without putting up a fight, I promise that I'll let you go. However, if you don't cooperate, well." The criminal lifted the barrel of his gun once to gesture its presence. "You know what happens. So how about you go ahead and be a good boy? And hand over your wallet, kid," he demanded as he glared at Izuku. Izuku trembled intensely as his legs were threatening to drop him to his knees, his body and voice unable to do anything to comply with the man. After waiting for about 10 seconds, the criminal groaned in annoyance as one of his eyes twitched. "Come on kid, you don't have a lot of options here. Nor do you have time to waste. So hurry the hell up and hand it over." He pressured almost angrily as he pushed the gun more outwards to the frightened teen, emphasizing his dangerous intentions if he didn't comply. Because of the man's motion, Izuku whimpered as his body managed to quickly turn him around so he can face the man finally. Still very much in fear for his life though, one of his feet took a step back. Unfortunately, that was all he was able to do before freezing up again. During the moments what were seemingly his last, Izuku's mind began to think of his mother. He teared up at the thought of how devastated Inko would be if she were to lose him. "Mom. I'm so sorry," he internally cried. The goon sighed as he squeezed on his gun handle in frustration. "Damn it kid, I was really hoping for us to do this the easy way, but..." He shrugged as his fingers started to apply pressure to the trigger, which didn't go unnoticed by Izuku as his eyes widened more and his already immense fear evidently spiked. "Oh well." The man grinned under his makeshift mask as these were the last words to come out of his mouth before he pulled the trigger. Please no." Izuku cried as he heard the trigger click, his forearms crossing each other in front of his face to shield it as his eyes shut tightly and his head face down. His right hand opened instinctively towards the gun-wielding criminal as he shouted. Then, bang. A brief fading echo followed by crackling. That was all Izuku heard after the gunshot. Now, what was strange and also relieving to him is that he was still very much alive and standing. He felt no pain whatsoever, nor did he sense death come to claim his soul. He panted heavily and continued to tremble for a few seconds before his eyes slowly opened and he looked at his chest. Upon opening his eyes and seeing what was awaiting his sights, the young Midoriya shakily gasped as the medallion that he thought he had gotten rid of earlier was levitating over his chest and its chain was around the back of his neck. The levitating wasn't the only strange thing that the jewel was doing, however. Like earlier, the white gemstone was glowing rather brightly, but that wasn't the only part of the pendant that was shining. As the baby blue snowflake was doing it as well. How did? The boy looked up as he lowered his arms. He was swiftly rendered dumbfounded by what he saw next upon raising his head. Standing frozen within a spiky chunk of ice was the thug. The bullet he fired was frozen as well, just a few inches away from the barrel of his gun. Ice. Izuku softly uttered to himself in astonishment as a few seconds later, he looked back down to the obviously weird, yet amazing, accessory that hovered over his chest. When looking back and forth a few times at the lit-up snowflake symbol in the ice-covered man, his mind was slowly putting two and two together as he then took a moment to look at the other symbols around the pendant. After he did that, that's when it finally dawned on him. This thing can control the elements. Chapter 2. The Elemental Entities. What is this thing? Who made it? Where did it come from? How did it do that? Izuku asked no one in particular with excitement as he was pacing back and forth beside the frozen criminal who had threatened to end his life not 2 minutes ago. His green eyes lighting up as a wide grin was stuck onto lips. He looked as if he was staring beauty right in its face. To him, he might as well have been. He looked into the now white again gemstone of the medallion that, by some unknown, had appeared around his neck out of nowhere after he was sure he left the pendant back in the park and the thing had the power to control elements. He then stopped his pacing as he then thought about why it could have possibly done so. Then another realization had hit him. So when that voice said you have been chosen. It was. His eyes slowly widened as he stared into the beautiful gemstone. It was talking to me. Of course it was. But what was talking to me? And why me? Were the green-haired teen's thoughts why the boy was asking the last question, not even he knew, but he just could not help but wonder just. Why? Hey. You there. Izuku's body instantly locked up upon hearing the loud voice behind him and seeing the light beam of a flashlight shining onto his back. Instinctively, Izuku reached behind his head to pull up his hoodie to hide his face. When he turned his head to look over his shoulder, he froze momentarily when seeing a police officer at the end of the alley. Police. But the fear of being caught now controlling him, Izuku did not waste any time at all and began bolting it down the alley to escape the officer. Freeze villain. The officer ordered as he began to make chase after the boy, looking at the frozen thief in shock for a second as he passed him. You're not saying that to the frozen guy with the gun. He tried to kill me. Izuku thought frantically as he was bolting it down the sidewalk, the officer not far behind him. Izuku needing to apologize loudly as he accidentally bumped shoulders with some civilians that he nearly caused them to tumble back, always having to look over his shoulder before he did so. You ain't getting away from me, villain. So give up. The officer shouted in warning as he was quickly gaining onto the teen. Izuku's fear only grew as he saw the man closing in on me. Please sir. I know his eyes widened as he began to feel like he couldn't feel his legs anymore. Still looking to the officer when he tried to speak, he saw that the man was also just as shocked as Izuku was as he was staring dumbfounded towards Izuku's legs. "EA?" Izuku exclaimed when he turned his head back to look down at his feet. His eyes widened from the surprise of seeing that his legs were beginning to dematerialize into a black mist, the rest of his body quickly joining it, a black cloud beginning to form the more his body began to fade away. The last thing the teen saw before completely dematerializing was the gem of the pendant now glowing a shadow black and the crescent moon also glowing, the black beams from the glow visible from the shape. Izuku let out a cry that only lasted a second before his head had faded completely. With the black cloud now complete, it began to float swiftly to higher ground as it slipped over the edges of a tall building. The officer slowly came to a stop as he watched a hooded boy turn to the black mist in awe. His jaw dropped and eyes wide as he saw it begin to fly away to the rooftops. He panted softly as he stared at the area it had disappeared over when coming to a complete stop. "He has 2 quirks." The officer asked no one as he stared at the same spot in confusion, yet also in astonishment. He had never seen a quirk do such a thing in his lifetime. The black mist had traveled along the rooftops, out of the sights of civilians, to get to its destination, which was the front door of Izuku's apartment home. Once the shadow mist had reached its destination, Izuku was heard screaming again for a second, and then a couple of grunts echoed right after. The dark cloud had rematerialized back into Izuku's body in the matter of a second, the boy tumbling on the floor after he returned to his original form. "Ah! Ah! Ah!" Izuku exclaimed before panting heavily when he quickly sat up from the ground, his head shooting around to identify his location. This is. He then looked beside him, immediately recognizing his home suite number and door. "My home." He stared at the door momentarily, his rapid breathing slowly coming to a steady pace. He got back up on his feet with a quiet groan, holding onto the outside railing before leaning on it lightly, his right hand reaching to his hood to pull it back off his head. What just happened? I'm pretty sure I didn't mean to do that," he whispered to himself, his right hand coming to the medallion on his chest and lifting it up for a good look at it. He gasped when he saw the gem was still glowing black for a few seconds longer before it began to fade away for the jewel to turn back to a pure white shade. The glow that was present within the crescent moon had died down. Just what is this thing? He regained enough composure for his mind to begin analyzing what had just occurred with the mist, looking cautiously at the crescent shape. "It's like this darn thing has a mind of its own. It just felt like it turned me into and nothing. I guess not only can the amulet manipulate its chosen element, but it seems." He gulped anxiously before speaking again. "It can even blend the chosen element with me as well. How the heck do I begin to even control this thing? So far, it's like it's been controlling me. And even when I tried to get rid of it, it just came right back." The boy's confused mind was beginning to give him a headache, his body slouching forward as his forearms rested on the railing, letting out a deep sigh. "Well, it got me out of bad situation. So I guess I can't complain and try to discriminate it." His thumb rubbed the hard jewel lightly as he looked down to his chested pendant. "Thanks. Who or whatever is in there." He chuckled awkwardly as his other hand rubbed the back of his neck, feeling weird that he was actually talking to a magical accessory. "Izuku?" The familiar curious voice of one Inko Midoriya, Izuku's loving and chubby mother, called out from behind the green-haired teen at the now open door of their home. The mother coming to check who was out there after hearing a voice from outside the door. Izuku immediately perked up when hearing her voice, his right hand pulling the medallion under his shirt before turning to her with a nervous smile. Hey mom. Sorry I'm a bit late, Jay just felt like walking a little while longer at the park before heading home. He blurted out with a forced laugh and a weak grin. Inko was no fool when it came to her son, all the telltale signs that something had him nervous were there, from his sweating forehead to his lightly trembling limbs and quivering smile. She lifted a brow at the boy with a suspecting glare in her eyes. Izuku, is there something you're not telling me? Izuku's tensed up more as his eyes widened anxiously, his chest aching from anxiety at his mother's rightful accusation. Crap. What am I supposed to tell her? Hey, mom. I found this necklace and now I have a quirk. Or quirks. It'll confuse her as much as it is me. He hated the fact that he had to lie to his mother about anything that troubled him. He always shared everything with her, but with the medallion and what it could do. He could only assume that she would not be able to comprehend its potentially dangerous capabilities and would only argue with him to get rid of it. Not like it would do a thing because of its mysterious, what he feels will be one, habit of returning back around his neck because it chose him. I promise mom, it's nothing to worry about, really. He waved his hands defensively in front of his chest as he let out a weak chuckle. Trying to stop his mother from pursuing something she wouldn't understand. Izuku. Inko crossed her arms as she lightly tapped her foot on the floor, impatience on her expression as it was quickly thinning the more her son continued to stall her pursuit for the truth. I know when you're hiding something from me. So you better spill it or I may just have to leave you outside for a while. Izuku suppressed a cringe that nearly formed on his face from the sound of disappointment in his mom's voice. He needed a good enough of excuse. A lie. The boy then closed his eyes as he took a deep breath, a shaky one at that. His body loosening up as he nodded in fake defeat. Sorry mom. On my way home, I may have ran. His left arm came to the back of his neck as he looked down and to the side. Into a stray dog on my way home and it chased me all the way here. I was just shaken up since it had almost got me. Izuku held back a gulp that he nearly did at his lie, already feeling the guilt of it consuming him, but tried with all his internal strength to stop it from showing on his face. That's the best you can do, Izuku. Sigh, I'm sorry mom. But I don't think you'd be ready for the truth. Oh my god, are you okay? Right on cue, Inko's maternal instincts had already went into overdrive as she was roughly moving Izuku's body to check for any wounds that the made-up stray dog could have inflicted on her baby boy. You're not hurt anywhere, are you? What did I say about being careful, son? The overprotective mother exclaimed as she already began to look fearful. And that's exactly why I can't tell you the truth. Izuku sighed internally before he then smiled when placing his hands on Inko's shoulders, trying to hold her still to calm her down. Mom, I'm fine, okay? It never got to me, I promise. I'm still alive and walking fine, right? Let's get inside, okay? We're probably disturbing the neighbors. Inko sighed in relief as a weight lifted off of her shoulders at her son's assuring words, though still quite concerned. The stress had already made her head hurt. She looked down with closed eyes, still breathing a bit heavily as she held her chest. Letting her son's touch ease her. Why yeah, you're right. I'm sorry for that, come on. The mother and son then walked into their home. Are you sure you're okay, Izuku? Inko asked worriedly, a longing to be assured once more dwelling in her heart. Izuku chuckled lightly as he nodded to her when stopping at the door to the hallway that led to the bedrooms. I'm sure mom, promise. Okay. Dinner's in the microwave if you're hungry. I'll save it till before bed. I'd just like to take a shower right now. Izuku gave her a final smile before he disappeared to the hallway and to his bedroom, leaving his mother in still a bit of a worried state. Around the midnight hour, Izuku was currently laying in his bed, wearing a black t-shirt with some gray shorts as his night attire. His right arm under his head on top of the pillow while his left hand was holding up the medallion between his index finger and thumb over his head, tilting and turning the pendant to take in its entirety more patiently. Just how do I get you to work without needing to be in a bad situation? Izuku whispered as his eyes were narrowed curiously at the object, stumped as he didn't even know where to begin to try and control the object's power. He then began to look at the element symbols along the side of the pendant, his thumb rubbing clockwise against the symbols. You said it. No. You chose me. So help me understand you. He uttered with a frown of defeat. After giving in, he gently placed the pendant down on his nightstand before laying back flat on the bed, letting out a low sigh as his left arm was now draped across his chest, staring blankly at the ceiling. So much for being the chosen one. Izuku whispered before sighing through his nose and slowly shut his eyes, feeling as if his hopes had once again disappeared. His dream of being a hero once again slipped away from his grasp. He was a few seconds into trying to get some sleep until what sounded like something rattling on wood had him open his eyes again. His head turned to his nightstand as the rattling was coming from right beside him, immediately gasping as he saw pendant shaking wildly on the wooden surface, the white gem's glow returning as it was flickering erratically. Izuku couldn't move a muscle as he watched the medallion seemingly acting up with widened eyes. Hey, what's going? Before he could even begin to question the amulet, he gasped sharply as he nearly jumped out of his bed up as suddenly a bright white beam shot out from the gem into the ceiling. Izuku's eyes watching the beam in shock, the light of the beam then began to glow in a blinding level of brightness, causing Izuku hide his face behind his arms as he let out a startled cry, the brightness having affected him a little before he tried to shield his eyes. What's going on with you? He shouted to the amulet as the beam was suddenly emitting a powerful gust of wind before everything went white. Ha. 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 Izuku breathed heavily as he remained shielding his eyes. The powerful wind suddenly became calm, and all was quiet. What happened? When the green-haired teen had lowered his arms and opened his eyes when he processed everything had died down. He was greeted to a sight that immediately had him fearing for his well-being, screaming at the top of his lungs and crawling back from the things that were in front of him a few feet before stopping and shivered from his overwhelming fear as he stared at the beings before him. Standing in front of the teen a few feet away from him in a V-shaped lineup were 9 humanoid entities standing tall at a good 7 feet. 5 of them appearing to have well-developed female figures and 4 of them appearing to have male-masculine figures. But these humanoid entities look different from each other. The one at the front middle was one of the women, who had visible human-like features, bright glowing eyes to make them more apparent than the rest of her body, long sparkling white hair going down to the back of her knees, and a bright gray sparkling aura emitting off the outline of her body. But what did the green-haired teen more startled to see was that she was all lightly glowing white. Her eyes, skin, everything was just white. 4 other entities were on each side of the woman, also appearing to have clear human-like features as well, along with bright wide eyes, standing by her in back diagonal lines. To the right line of her was a woman with a dark red womanly figure that had bright orange fire blazing off her, the crackling of her body and long thick flaming hair that went down to her waist, echoing around them. Next was a male that looked like a muscular overgrown stone of a humanoid with big arms that were crossed at its broad chest and green grass appearing as its hair. Then there was another female entity that had its figure apparent with smooth flowing dark gray hair and short hair brushed over to the right side of head. And lastly for the right line was a male figure made entirely out of shadows, having spiky hair and faint white lines, outlining its facial and bodily features. Now to the left line of the Aura woman, first was a male humanoid figure with a muscular build, wide eyes, and looked to be made entirely out of clear fresh water. Next was a womanly figure that appeared to made out of ice, frost smoke coming off her body, and having ice spikes taking the shape of a spiky mohawk on her head. The third entity of the left line was another muscular male figure with purple glowing skin that had yellow electricity sparking erratically on its body and slick up-ed yellow hair. Lastly was the final female being that had a bright orange body, thick long flowing blonde hair that went to her lower back and yellow light glowing off her. The aura, light, air women had gentle smiles shaping their lips, while the fire and ice women had smirks on theirs. The man made of stone having a blank face, the shadow and lightning entities having excited grins on them, though the shadow male looked a bit more scary to Izuku. And the man made of water having a soft smile of his own. Izuku gasped rapidly as he simply stared back wide-eyed at the tall beings in front of him. His hands holding onto the seemingly never-ending grass field that was below them, the sky being a beautiful blue, a bright yellow sun, wind flowing calmly around them, a large thick tree nearby behind the beings, and numerous clouds littering the open sky. We understand that you are quite confused and have plenty of questions, young Midoriya. The aura-emitting woman was the first to break the silence, with her mature, gentle, motherly voice, bringing her hands to the center of her stomach. The fire woman having a hand on her hip and the other hanging by her side. The ice lady having her arms crossed, the woman of light having her hands behind her back, and the air woman simply keeping her arms to her sides. The water male had his own arms crossed along with the stone man. The shadow man having his fingers interlocked at the back of his head and the man of lightning having one of his forearms going across his chest, the hand holding up the other arm's elbow as the hand had the being's chin resting on its lightly clenched fist. But I promise, all will be explained. The woman's gentle smile got bigger after speaking, the being still staring down at the confused and frightened teenager who continued to stare back at them as he trembled on the ground. What the hell? Chapter 3. Symbol of Hope. Hey mom, I think the kid's dead. The youthful voice of the female fire entity spoke out as she chuckled at the poor green-haired boy who was pretty much a stunned agape statue for the last minute, staring at the beings. Hush, child. He's just comprehending. The white aura woman replied as she shook her head with a small smile. Give him a bit. You know, for someone who lives in a world where people can do so many incredible things with their quirks. It's strange how seeing us has him so shocked. The shadow figure spoke with a youthful raspy voice. You really should try and look at it from his perspective, brother. It's not every day a human suddenly opens his eyes to a new environment and sees 9 individuals who are literal beings made of elements. The woman of light spoke in a cute, soft, feminine tone. But still, the shadow man was about to retort, but they were all quick to stop and look to the boy when hearing him begin to speak up. What are you all? Izuku uttered with a stutter, his body ceasing its trembling, the more he had began to let everything sink it and somewhat relax. The water male let out a short, soft laugh before taking the mantle to reply to the boy. Welcome back to the land of the mystical living, and to answer your question. He then cocked his head towards the aura woman by his side and smirked. Well, she'll explain. Thank you, Hydran. The motherly figure of the beings nodded to the male to her left before looking back to Izuku on the ground. Before we begin, I just want to assure you, we mean you no harm. She then let out a quick chuckle. As a matter of fact, we were the ones who saved your life back in that alley and helped you escape from the authorities. Upon hearing this revelation, Izuku's eyes widened as his gaze began to wander at the ice and shadow beings in the lineup. So it was them? Izuku thought to himself, or at least he thought he did. Indeed, it was them, young Midoriya. Izuku felt his heart stop momentarily when hearing the Aura Mother simply reply to his thoughts. His eyes widening more as he let out a shaky gasp. Why? You can. Why you can read my thoughts? Izuku asked the woman as he slowly began to stand back up to his feet, though his body language was telling them he was still cautious towards them. The ice female let out a laugh that instantly had her needing air as she held her gut. Oh man. This boy's reactions just keep on getting cuter. It took her a few seconds to compose herself, Izuku already having a slight pout on his lips from the woman's teasing. Settle down, glasses. The Aura woman let out a sigh and looked to Izuku with an apologetic look. Excuse my daughter, she can be a bit too open with her thoughts, and yes we can. Now that we are connected to you. She gave the ice woman a short glare when looking to her side. Whoops. The ice woman simply replied as she raised her hands by her shoulders with a shrug, a smirk on her lips as she cocked her head to the side. Your daughter? Connected to me? Izuku then looked at each entity beside the mother individually, taking in every feature of them more thoroughly, now that his mind was eased enough. Though he blushed upon realizing the fact that if they weren't made out of elements, he would be seeing things he should not have been seeing as each of them were seemingly bare. That's right. Allow me to introduce ourselves. The woman then bowed her head to the bow before bringing a hand to her chest, lightly planting her white fingertips on the center of her chest. I am Animus, the elemental of life, and these are my children. She then gestured to the line up at her right, her hand held up in front of the fire female. This is Ember, the elemental of fire. Sup. The fire woman brought one of her index fingers and middle fingers to the side of her head before flicking them away from it, giving her greeting. Slate, the elemental of earth. The stone Hulk simply nodded with a light grunt as a greeting. Admos, the elemental of air. The air woman gave the boy a nod in greeting as she crossed her arms with a small smile. Greetings. She spoke in a deep, authoritative feminine tone. Shade, the elemental of darkness. The shadow man chuckled with a wicked-looking grin as he nodded in greeting as well. Well, hello there. His raspy voice spoke. To my left. Her left hand then extended to her left side towards her children. Hydron, the elemental of water. The water being gave him a cheerful grin as he gave the boy a single wave with a hand. Pleasure to meet you, master. He spoke in a respectful manner. Lassus, the elemental of ice and snow. The ice woman gave Izuku a grin as one of her hands held her hips, leaning it into her palm. Yo. She greeted in a chill, laid back down. Alva, the elemental of lightning. The purple and yellow electric man grinned as his head lifted slightly as his greeting. Salutations. And Aurora, the elemental of light. Hello, master. The woman of light spoke in a cutesy tone before she bowed slightly while her hand stayed behind her back, giving the teen a comforting smile when leaning back up. Izuku stared in awe as hearing the names of each elemental had him mesmerized. Their names sounded as beautiful as they looked with their element-blended bodies. He then looked confused, once again, and curious upon remembering how the water and light elemental had referred to him. Wait. Why did they call me master? The woman then giggled lightly as her warm smile got bigger at the teen. Because it seems my husband has deemed you worthy of wielding our power. Connecting us, as well as himself, to you, Izuku. To your body, heart and mind. It was how we had suddenly appeared back around your neck in the alley and able to tell your thoughts. She added as she pointed out on herself two of the last listed areas. Why your husband? If there's 10 of you. Where is he? Izuku asked as he is fairly confident that he is only seeing 9 entities in front of him. Aurora took it upon herself to answer the question as she raised a finger up by her shoulder as she gave a cheerful smile. Yup. Dear old daddy. You may not be able to see him, but we can assure you, he is all around us as we speak. All around us. What does that even mean? Izuku asked in slight frustration, the cryptic answer of the light entity only giving him more questions than answers. Ease yourself, young Midoriya. Animus gestured with a hand towards the boy to support her instruction. Look around you. With the same hand, she gestured by bringing her hand to one side in front of her, before slowly gliding it across her to the other side while she was looking at their surroundings. Everything you see is my husband, the clouds, the grass, the tree, the sun, the sky. When saying the last 2 words, she had a fond smile on her lips as she was looking up. Everything around us is him. For he is Exos, the elemental of creation. He created everything you see, even me. She then pointed to herself momentarily as she looked back to the green-haired boy. He created me to give him life as he so romantically put it. She giggled lightly as she looked down for a moment with another fond smile on her lips. Before mankind, before me, before anything else. He created the universe, the stars, the planets. But one world he fonded over more for its initial beauty. Was Earth. So he made it his home. Just so he wasn't alone, he created me, a being for him to love and share the beauty of his home and creations with. It was just me and him for so long. The world was a big place. And even though we had each other, it still felt rather lonesome. So it was only a matter of time before we decided to create life on Earth, and that life was humanity, along with the animals and other living beings that exist in the world. Izuku's eyes widened intensely after hearing out the Aura woman's words, letting out a shaky gasp as B immediately put two and two together to understand what she meant. Wait. Are you saying what I think you're saying? The woman nodded as her hands came to her stomach again. Yes, Exos is the being that started the universe, your world, and after he created me, together, we have brought mankind's existence into fruition. With my element to give life and my husband's element to create. It was possible for us to make it so. After creating the life we had intended, we have entered the astral plane of existence to watch over mankind from there, though. We did not foresee the terror that would plague a fragment of humanity. Izuku was silent in shock upon this new revelation. Right now, he was standing in front of one of mankind's celestial parents. One of the beings who was responsible for humanity's existence. The real goddess of humanity, the goddess of the universe. Why? You see, our created us. The woman nodded before looking to the sky. And my dear Exos as well. We'll admit, as many millennia had passed after creating the humans, we began to fear we had made a mistake in giving them free will. As many were quick to be consumed by evil, greed, darkness, something we couldn't prevent. But we remained hopeful as there was always a large fragment of individuals with pure hearts, with the desires to do good and help humanity progress down a brighter path. The right path. For the humans that were already lost to the dark path. Especially now that Quirk seemed to accelerate them to it, it was too late for us to do anything, too late for them. We so desperately wanted to help them steer away from evil. But we knew that if we had crossed back into the physical plane and revealed ourselves, we would only be feared, discriminated. And we couldn't bear the thought of humanity fearing us, hating us. So we didn't. The Aura woman frowned as she looked back down for a moment before looking back to the boy and smiled again. At least not yet. My husband found a way, formulated a plan to return to the physical plane in a way so that we can grant a worthy human the chance to aid his fellow man. To save them from those who had already been corrupted and being corrupted. Humans who wanted to do good with their existence. Humans who wanted to become heroes. Izuku's eyes widened as after hearing that, he had a faint idea of what she could have possibly meant by that. So the medallion. It's. The Aura woman smiled brightly when seeing that the boy was finally beginning to understand. Yes, the medallion. Is Exos. Before he had turned himself into the medallion. We created our children, beings capable of manipulating the elements of fire, water, air, earth, lightning, ice and snow, as well as light and darkness. And after we had created the elementals. Exos had transformed his body into the medallion and turned himself into our home you see around you now. He is the only one with the power and strength to contain us. Then, we commenced with his plan and returned to the physical plane, letting the fates guide us towards those who could be deemed worthy to wield the power of the elements. That had Izuku gasp shakily again after hearing her confession. His limbs shaking as he realized that both gods of creation had chosen him worthy of possessing the power of the elemental beings in front of him, and a weightful pressure was beginning to press onto him. But why me? Why did he? Why did you all choose me? What makes me so worthy? I'm just a quirkless nobody. Izuku looked down with a frown, his fists clenching tight by his sides, looking discouraged as he began to think about all the times people had kicked him while he was down. Who had proceeded to break him down piece by piece. All the times people had rubbed his lack of a quirk in his face. Young Midoriya. You may see yourself as worthless. Someone who has no hope of ever achieving what he truly desires because he doesn't have a quirk. But Exos didn't see that. We didn't see that. We saw a young man who was destined for greatness. A young man who could do many wonderful things if he was given the chance. We saw the next symbol of hope who would shine his purifying light onto darkness and vanquish it. We saw a young man who wanted to devote his life to saving the innocent lives that are so commonly threatened by villains nowadays. With a smile on his face. Anima slowly walked up to the boy who was looking up at her in surprise, now that she was standing in front of him. Izuku raising his head to meet the eyes of the tall entity. At that moment, Izuku was beginning to shake more as his face slowly began to cringe from a crying fit that was begging to come out. What the woman would say next would break the barrier holding back his emotions. The Aura woman reached her hand to place it gently on his shoulder, giving the boy a comforting, warm smile. We saw a young man who was destined to become a hero. It was at that moment Izuku's tears began to fall down his cheeks once the barrier had finally given out as he began to slowly fall to his knees. Whimpers beginning to come out of his mouth as he looked down, his eyes shutting tightly as he sniveled. The entities all looked to the joyful crying Izuku with smiles on their faces. The Aura mother slowly stepping back from the boy and back towards her children. Izuku was now crying his heart out on his hands and knees as he heard the words that he had waited his entire life to hear from someone, anyone who had believed in him. There were those who believed in him, and there were 10 beings who would grant him the opportunity to become the one thing he had hoped to become in life, a hero. While the boy was crying, the elemental family were back to their original lineup. They then closed their eyes as they bowed their heads, their right hands coming to the center of their chests. As soon as their hands were in position, in a bright white light, each of their respective element symbols appeared on the back of their hands. Animus's hand having what appeared to look like a tree. As soon as the symbols appeared, the sky over them went dim, and then a loud boom was heard echoing around them from nowhere. After the boom was heard, something was happening to the entities. With Animus, a pillar of dark gray aura shot into the darkened sky. With Ember, a pillar of fire. With Hydron, a pillar of water. With Slate, a pillar of rushing stone. With Glacis, a pillar of snow. With Atmos, a straight cyclone of air. With Galva, a pillar of lightning. With Shade, a rushing straight cyclone of shadows. And with Aurora, a bright yellow pillar of light. The rising elements blended together into the sky, creating a bright white pulsing funnel cloud. Izuku gasped as he looked up at the cloud, slowly getting back on his feet after wiping his eyes of tears. Then the level of brightness rised enough that he had to slightly shield his eyes once again. He groaned as he then completely covered his eyes as the cloud shined at blinding levels suddenly. Though it only lasted for a few seconds, he remained covering his eyes, panting softly. Really fearing he'd go blind if these sudden bright flashes kept happening. "You may open your eyes, young Midoriya." Izuku's gasped again as his eyes widened behind his arms. He heard a deep mature male voice that was familiar to him. He then quickly remembered that voice he had heard back in the park from when he had first touched the medallion. Upon lowering his arms, Izuku's eyes widened as standing directly in front of him was another tall humanoid entity, except this one was a hairless muscular male that was pure black with bright white lines outlining his body and facial features. And in his body were what looked like stars. I am Exos, the elemental of creation. What Animus has explained to you is true. My plan was to turn my body into an amulet powerful enough to contain the elementals, my family, return to the physical plane of existence, and search for chosen heroes that would wield our powers for the sake of protecting all that is pure and innocent. It has been centuries since we have found a new human worthy of possessing our abilities. A human with a desire to save them from darkness, to preserve and replenish the hope they have lost when they see a smile on his face, even if it risks his life, and I have seen exactly that within you. We have felt it within you. That is why today, with our utmost confidence, we declare you. It was then Izuku quickly stood up and stumbled back a couple feet when suddenly Exos began to shoot off a white pillar of energy, along with his family. The team then gasped rapidly as he stared in fascination that the family of elementals were now pointing at him, their eyes open to gaze at him, and all together in booming loud voices, spoke the elemental guardian. It is your time, Izuku Midoriya. To show the world that you can and will become the greatest hero to ever live. For you are the hero of the elements. It was then, the medallion suddenly appeared around the neck of Izuku, levitating slightly off his chest. The elemental symbols were all glowing together in their respective colors, and in the center where the glowing white gemstone was, showed a tree of life symbol shining in black. Izuku gazed astonishingly at the pendant, wondering just what exactly the new symbol on the gem had meant. His question was about to be answered. Once again, Exos began to speak up. Now that it is official. You now have the element of life in your hands, as well. Wield the elements with pride, young Midoriya. And show every being of darkness that you are a force to be reckoned with. And that you will always triumph over them if they dare to challenge you. Return, my child. And strive towards your dream. It was then everything suddenly went white for Izuku, but this time, it didn't affect him to hurt his eyes. His eyes remaining wide from his astonishment at the entity's declaration, tears still rolling down his cheeks. Instantly, the white light had died down, and Izuku gasped as he found himself standing in the middle of his bedroom. Izuku whipping his head in shock to seeing himself back home, panting softly. He let out a sigh of relief that he had returned, thankfully nothing seemed to have woken up his mother. Huh. A light ringing sound caught his ear as it was coming from the medallion at his chest. His lips slowly turned to a joyful grin as he lifted the pendant to look at it. The elemental symbols were still glowing brightly around the white gem that was glowing as well, the tree of life symbol still there. The elementals are yours to command, young Midoriya. Whenever you need us, we'll always be there. The comforting, motherly voice of Animus was heard from the medallion, which caused Izuku to smile in glee as he nodded, not taking his eyes off the medallion. I won't let any of you down, I promise. And thank you. Thank you all for believing in me. Izuku said with his tears now lightly running again. The glowings of the medallion slowly died down, the tree of life slowly fading away into obscurity in the gem. After the glowing had died, he let out a deep breath before letting out a quiet, enthusiastic chuckle. His hand grasped the pendant in his palm before he made his way to look out into the surroundings of the view at his window. Determination now visible on his face as he held the medallion to his chest. It's my time. My chance to become a hero. My chance to prove to everyone that I can do it. And I will not let this opportunity go to waste. Chapter 4. Purpose. Due to the overwhelming excitement that Izuku finally had powers blessed to him by elemental gods coursing through him, it had been a difficult task for him to get to sleep, as it was now currently 4 hours into a new Saturday. Meaning he had no work or school. He decided that it would be around noon that he would test out just what exactly the elementals can do for him, and just how he can manipulate their powers. He already had an idea of what to test first. The teen having had his eyes closed, but his body was still jittering as he so nearly let out victorious squeals for nearly 3 hours, as it was now 4 o'clock in the morning, but there was no result of sleep whatsoever. I know you're excited and all, master, but it'd be bad if you decided to use us without having some decent rest. We can't have you passing out on us if you run into trouble. The cutesy, young voice of Aurora can be heard coming from the medallion on Izuku's nightstand next to him. The light elemental symbol was lighting up, indicating she was speaking up. Izuku chuckled nervously as he looked to the medallion, slowly sitting up and moving back to lean on his wall. Sorry about that, Aurora. It's just that. He reached to gently take the medallion into his hand and held it up in front of him. Now looking down to the amulet, he showed a grateful smile at the lit up sun on the rounding left side. You have no idea just how happy you all made me for choosing me to be your guardian. All my life, people have done nothing but destroy my dreams of ever becoming a hero, just because I lacked a quirk. I thought I had completely given up. That I had abandoned all my hope in that dream. But now knowing that you all chosen me, it showed me that I had what it takes. That you believed in me. That's all I ever wanted for someone, heck anyone, to tell me. That I can become a hero. Izuku smiled softly at the amulet for only a moment before he suddenly began to frown as a despairing thought had came to his mind, a painful question. Or are you all just doing it out of pity? Just to cheer me up? Izuku asked with a saddened tone, praying for that not to be the case. The FFT. Geez, chill out, master. The voice of Glasses was suddenly heard from the medallion as well, the bright blue snowflake glowing up, along with the yellow sun. Do you really think we would be stupid enough to choose you like that? Suddenly, it was the water elemental's turn to speak as the dark blue water droplet was lighting up. Yes, master. Ease your emotions. We are the elemental gods. We would not choose the elemental guardian just because we felt sorry for a kid who had no choice but to accept the fact he couldn't fulfill his dream. The hero of the elements is too big a responsibility to decide on that. The green air elemental symbol lit up after Hydron had finished speaking, Atmos now voicing her answer. Indeed, our father was the one who had chosen you. He has seen all the qualities required to wield the elements. He has the best judgment out of all of us. He chose every guardian before you, and all the past guardians had done their duty of the elemental warrior with grace, honor and justice. So we fail to see why him choosing you is so wrong. After hearing the elemental entities answer him, he could sense the sincerity in their voice. A smile on his face once again. Now with his confidence having returned, he began feeling ridiculous and guilty that he had dared question the gods. The flame symbol lit up, Ember now speaking up to the teen. Yup, daddy knows best. So chin up, master. You really should take confidence in knowing the elemental of creation has chosen you to wield us. Not every day your creator gives you his personal attention and blessing. Izuku let out an anxious chuckle, reaching one hand to rub the back of his neck. Still trying to comprehend that the beings who had created the universe and world as mankind knows it are currently around his neck, who will be till his dying day. And he was chosen to wield the element of life, Animus, the true goddess of the universe's power for good. Why yeah, alright. I'm sorry for doubting you all. There was a peaceful silence between the teen and the elemental children, his hand back down from his neck and a small smile on his face. I am pleased to see that you are already getting along with the children, young Midoriya. Suddenly, Animus's voice was heard as the white gemstone began to glow, the tree of life emblem returning visible in the center. It's good since using the elements requires you to trust and have faith in us whenever you need us. We are your friends. Well, I guess you can say we are part of your family now, since from now on, we will be a part of your life till the end. Izuku's heart fluttered at the caring tone of the life elemental. Hearing the woman's voice had done wonders to ease any tension he would get. The boy gave a brighter smile and a nod as he hummed. Well, you all trusted me to have your power. So it's only right I trust you and do what is expected of me. Obviously, not that I'm complaining. The goddess was heard chuckling lightly at the boy's words before speaking to him again. I don't doubt that we'll see many great things from you, young Midoriya. I feel as though you may be the best guardian yet." Izuku blushed softly at the woman's high belief in him, that grateful feeling for the elementals only continuing to increase. Thank you, Animus. He then sighed in disbelief as he looked to the life symbol. "It still feels like a dream that you all granted me this gift, your gift. And it's especially too amazing to believe that humanity's celestial parents had deemed me worthy to harness it." The woman of life was heard giggling lightly after the boy spoke. "Well, you better get used to it, my child, because we're gonna be around for a long time," the life elemental said humorously. Izuku chuckled softly at that, nodding to the medallion, pleased with her response. He then looked curious as he thought about something that Exos had mentioned during the time he made his role as the elemental guardian official. "Hey Animus. Exo said that it had been centuries since you all last had chosen a guardian. Just how many exactly?" "Well, it is currently the 22nd century. So, 1, 2, 3, 4. It was near the end of the 15th century. So, 7. The mother elemental replied nonchalantly. Izuku's eyes widened in disbelief as his head leaned forward to the pendant. "The 15th century." He gasped and immediately covered his mouth as he had nearly screamed out his words. He took a deep breath, looking to his door anxiously, thinking that he had woken up his mother. After 10 seconds of hearing nothing, he sighed in relief and uncovered his mouth before looking to the medallion once more. "Wow. That century's all right. If I may ask. How many guardians were chosen before me? And who was the last one?" Izuku asked curiously, awaiting the mother's reply. "There were 8 worthy guardians chosen before you. Each one chosen between extensive periods of time. As for the last guardian," the elemental was heard sighing before continuing. "It was a Native American girl by the name of Yana. A beautiful, patient, and caring young woman. A woman who looked to me and my husband as her parents, and we looked to her as our daughter. Who looked at our children as her own brothers and sisters, and they looked to her as a sister. A woman who wasn't afraid to share everything with us, to trust us with every fiber of her being, even though she physically had no one. Who took on her duty as the elemental guardian with true honor and grace. An ideal wielder of the elements. We had only hoped she lived long enough to protect her people from those who had gone to claim their lands." The Aura woman ended with a saddened voice. Izuku frowned after the mother went silent, looking down with guilt of reminding her of someone she looked to as her own child. "Wow. So long ago and all the way in America. I'm so sorry, Animus. I didn't mean to bring up all that pain." Izuku apologized as he looked slightly up at the glowing gem. "I'm sorry to you all for your loss. It is alright, my child. We have moved on. We may be able to grant those chosen to harness extraordinary power. But we cannot grant immortality. Death will always come. It's humanity's way of life." The atmosphere around Izuku and the elemental medallion was silent and depressing for a long moment before Izuku put on a smile for the gods and goddesses. "I'm sure Yana is thankful for everything you have given her, Animus. Thankful for the great life you all have given her. I know if I was in her place at the time, I'd just be happy to know I always had those that cared for me, even though they're not physically there. You all were still there. Having done everything you can." Izuku spoke in a tender manner. "Thank you, young Midoriya. That means a lot to us." The elemental symbols then all simultaneously glowed brightly for a second before fading away, showing that they all had been listening and appreciated his kind words. Izuku had a hopeful gleam in his eyes. "Anytime. As much as I am enjoying our time together, child. You must be getting off to sleep now. You have a big day tomorrow, you get to experience the life of being an elemental guardian." The celestial mother spoke in a cheerful voice, which only seemed to spike Izuku's excitement as he was reminded of the powers. Izuku pouted at the white gem, letting out a sigh. "You know, when you put it like that, I don't think I'll be getting to bed anytime soon." Izuku chuckled after his words, the elemental mother doing so as well. He then looked anxious as he immediately remembered something that could prevent him from using his powers in the public eye. The brown earth elemental symbol lit up before a deep sigh was heard from the pendant. "Mother, he's making that face again. Something is making him doubt." Slate, the earth elemental, finally had spoken up in a deep, rough voice, for the first time since Izuku had known about his existence back in their world. Izuku squeaked as he shivered upon hearing the earth elemental point out the clearly obvious expression on his face, gulping as he stared wide-eyed at the pendant. "I see it, my son. What is troubling now, young Midoriya?" Animus asked the green-haired teen in concern. Izuku breathed shakily through his nose as he looked down in worry at his lap. A frown back on his lips. "Well, you see. It's against the law for those with quirks to use them in public without being registered as licensed heroes. I missed the first 2 years to enter a hero school. So I thinks it's pretty much hopeless for me to become an official hero to society. So, if I use you, I'll be breaking the law. I'll be thought of as a Bville. That is enough, young Midoriya. Animus demanded the boy to silence his tongue as she had spoke to Izuku in a firm tone for the first time, which immediately had the boy started, lightly whimpering as he nearly jumped out of his bed. We know what you are going to say, my child. And it is not true. The purple lighting elemental symbol began to glow. Yeah. You are the elemental guardian, master. A warrior of unimaginable power granted to you personally by the gods themselves. The black crescent moon began to glow as well. Shade's raspy voice speaking up exactly, no law has the right to restrain you when you are using your gift to protect those who need it. Who need hope in their lives. And we are not quirks. Ember's elemental symbol glowed as she spoke up frustratingly after Shade. We are far better than any quirk could ever possibly be. And humanity would be wise not to compare them to us. Besides, Glasses spoke up after Ember, her elemental symbol glowing up with the rest. Soon every symbol had been glowing brightly together. It's not like they could ever catch you. I mean, as you saw what Shade had done to you earlier in the night. You can just turn into a black mist or snow since you have me and, well, fly away. The ice and snow elemental let out a chuckle as she finished. Pretty cool, isn't it, master? Shade spoke up again in confidence, taking pride in his success of getting his master out of the trouble with the authorities. Even I can help you turn into air and they would never see where you had wandered off to. Atmo spoke in pride as well, also speaking as if she was taunting her shadow brother with the extra useful benefit of her element. Shade then scoffed before mumbling. Show off. Cheater. Bye. Enough, children. Animus once again spoke firmly, this time to the elemental children, to which they quickly zipped up their mouths and remained silent, obeying their mother. Even though things got a bit off track there. They do bring up a good point, young Midoriya. You are a being of higher power now, my child. Whose sole purpose is to protect the world and its people. No law of prohibition can ever hold you down or hold you back from doing just that. The innocent have no time to wait for a hero who can do so much for them at this very moment. The heroes of today will see what you can do. What you can do for them. What you can do for society. You will shape the world of heroes as a whole. As you are the symbol of hope. The beacon of light that will inspire mankind to do as you do. To follow in your footsteps. To follow your legacy. Isn't that right, my children? Animus asked the elemental children with a voice of pride and confidence. Hell yeah, Ember voiced first with enthusiasm. You bet. Hydran voiced second undoubtedly. Yup. Glasses voiced third in excitement. Certainly. Atmos voiced fourth nonchalantly. Slate simply hummed fifth in agreement. I believe in the master. Galva sixth. Oh, things are gonna be so much fun. Shade voiced in a giddy manner. I have to agree with Shade. Aurora voiced with a giggle after her words. Well, there you have it, my child. Animus spoke up once again. Do not let any law prevent you from fulfilling your destiny, young Midoriya. You are a hero because we have chosen you. Don't you ever forget that. And don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Do you understand us? Izuku was in awe at the medallion, letting the elemental's words of hope and faith in him sink into his heart. His jaw slightly dropped as he held the medallion up. Now, truly understanding his purpose. Do you understand us, my child? Animus asked much more firmly. Izuku smiled brightly as he clenched the medallion lightly and gave a swift nod of his head. I understand. Animus let out a chuckle before speaking again. Now there's the look of a true hero. Chapter 5. The Elemental Guardian. Now that all your doubt has been ridden of, my child. You really should be getting some sleep. Animus instructed the boy with a more gentle tone now. Who was still full of motivation and energy to begin his elemental guardian duties. Alright, but again Animus. You keep getting me really excited. So you all are making it really hard to even want to sleep. Izuku let out a nervous chuckle as he began to lay down in his bed, putting the medallion back on his nightstand before laying on his side to look at the elementals and pulled up the blanket around his shoulders. Animus was heard giggling at the boy's words before responding to him. We apologize for that. We just do enjoy the look of a hopeful hero. Don't worry, I believe I can help you. Izuku looked curious as to what she would suggest. How so? Just lie down, relax and sleep, young Midoriya. Animus instructed gently, to which Izuku obeyed the celestial mother and began to snuggle under his blanket as a couple seconds after she spoke. Animus was heard humming a gentle, soothing melody which had an immediate effect on the green-haired teen as his eyes were already beginning to feel heavy, blinking rapidly for a second as he was instinctively fighting the sudden urge to drift off into slumber. Rest, my child. You will need it. Animus took a quick moment to soothe the teen with her gentle words, which did just that as the boy now squinted tired eyes were slowly coming to a complete close. Good night. Everyone. Izuku whispered to the elementals before finally succumbing to the life elemental's lullaby. Good night, master. Good night, young Midoriya. The elementals were all heard bidding Izuku a good night before finally their symbols and their glows slowly died down, letting their new worthy guardian rest. Izuku slept soundly till about 10 o'clock before he was awoken to the sound of knocking at his door and Inko speaking up from the other side. Izuku, breakfast is ready. Don't let it go cold now. The boy's mother was then heard walking away from the door and heading back towards the direction of the living kitchen area of their home. Izuku groaned lightly as his eyes began to open with a slow flutter, now lying on his back and facing the ceiling. He yawned as he pushed himself up to sit up on his bed, his arms stretching as his back arched. After his yawn, his hands came to rub the sleep away from his eyes. One hand remained on his eyes as he slipped his feet over the side of the bed and planted his feet on the floor. Good morning, everyone. Izuku greeted the elementals as he smiled tiredly down at the medallion. As he expected, all the elemental symbols began to glow brightly, indicating they were awaiting his awakening. Good morning, young Midoriya. Animus was first to speak up. The flock of the elemental children greeting the teen with cheerful, some nonchalant simple good mornings or morning, finishing their greetings with his title of master at the end. Have you slept well? Animus asked Izuku in a gentle tone. To which Izuku chuckled softly and gave a slight shrug. I slept alright, I guess. Though, nearly 6 hours of sleep usually isn't enough to be considered a full rest, but I'm confident I'll stay on my feet through the day. Thanks for asking. The teen then looked curious about a question he had towards the beings. Wait, didn't any of you get any sleep? Izuku pouted as immediately he was responded to in scoffs, chuckles and giggles from the elementals. What? I ask something funny? Oh, child. We are immortal celestial beings. We do not require sleep like humans do. We have never slept during the entirety of our existence. Apologies, but that question was just a silly one to be asked of us. The life mother was heard giggling for a second longer before slowly dying it down. Izuku was left embarrassed as he began to think that he should have expected that from the beings. Alright, that was dumb of me to ask. Do not fret, child, it is alright. Now get ready and listen to your mother. It is impolite for a child to keep their mother waiting. That immediately had Izuku standing up and began to bolt around for today's clothing. Right away, ma'am. He saluted before getting right to it. The teen's attire consisted of a dark gray t-shirt and a pair of camo cargo shorts with various shades of green. After he had gotten over with his changing, he began to walk over to his door. As Izuku was about to open the door, he gasped lightly as suddenly the medallion materialized around his neck in a faint glow of light. Do not be forgetting about us, young Midoriya. Animus voiced in a tone of disappointment. If the boy could see her now, he would be greeted to the celestial mother pouting to him. Izuku let out an awkward chuckle as he rubbed the back of his head with a weak smile. Sorry about that, guys. He apologized to the elementals before gently grabbing the medallion and putting it under his shirt. The elemental symbols glowed, dying down, so they would not be seen through the thin piece of fabric. The teen leaving the room once they were ready. Morning, Mom. Izuku greeted the chubby mother as he had went to go sit down at the dinner table after entering the living quarters. Good morning, Izuku. The mother greeted her son back as she was currently pouring juice into glasses. Izuku's eyes lit up to the sight of pancakes and bacon on a plate at his spot. Alright. Pancakes. He blurted out happily before he picked up his knife and fork. Thanks for the food. He uttered before beginning to cut up the pancakes into perfect square and triangular shapes before digging in. Inko chuckled as she rolled her eyes when carrying the 2 juice-filled glasses over to the table, seeing her son pretty much inhaling his food. Settle down, Izuku. You're gonna end up clogging your throat with all you're taking down at once. The woman joked as she placed a glass in front of Izuku before going around the small square table and sitting down across the boy. Izuku held up a finger with one hand as the other was pounding lightly at his chest, below the medallion to help take in the food. He let out a satisfied sigh before chuckling nervously to his mother. Sorry, Mom, but you know how I get every time I wake up to your pancakes. Now beginning to eat a more calm pace. The mother lives to please her child. But that doesn't mean I try to make you crazy with what I cook. The mother and son chuckled at that statement, the two eating together as Inko got into eating her own food. So, you have any plans for today? If you have homework, you better get on it. Inko spoke in a gentle, demanding tone. Izuku scoffed lightly as he held back a chuckle, and a smile was on his lips. I'm already caught up, Mom, don't worry. He responded before taking in another square piece of the pancake, chewing and swallowing before continuing. And I do have plans actually. So I may be out till later this evening. Is that alright? Don't need me for anything? Izuku asked in concern. Inko shook her head with a light hum as she smiled. No, was just asking since it's Saturday and all. Don't worry. So what are your plans? Izuku chuckled as he lightly scratched. Well, let's just say I'm going to work out. He shrugged as he gave an awkward smile. Inko lifted a brow at that reply, as her son has not done much working out in his lifetime. So she found it odd that he was suddenly doing so. Then again, she knew it was the best way to stay active, plus, they both knew the boy could use a little bit more muscle. Well, alright then. You be careful, okay? Don't overexert yourself. I don't want to be expecting any phone calls from the hospital. Inko finished humorously. I won't, Mom, don't worry. The two shared a short laugh before enjoying the rest of their breakfast in peace. After an hour since breakfast, Izuku was now looking over the edge of a 25-story tall glass building, overlooking the busy streets and lively people of the city of Musatafu. Oh god. That's really high, guys. Izuku uttered in suppressed fear as he was looking straight down over the edge, his eyes widened as for a moment it looked like it was getting higher. He gulped as he took a step back from the edge and took a deep breath as he shivered. So, before we get started, how exactly am I gonna control your powers? Izuku asked as he looked to the all-glowing medallion on his chest. Animus was heard giggling before responding. It is quite simple really. Just call out to whichever one of us you need, it could even be in your head, and we will be there to grant you the element to use how you see fit. As for how to use them, well, just simply imagine it, and you will bend the element to your desire. See, simple. Izuku's head shot back slightly as his eyes widened in surprise. So it's just all up to my mind then? You're not pulling my leg, are you? He asked curiously, needing to make sure if he is understanding the celestial parent correctly. Yes and not at all. Imagination and the mind are two very powerful things, young Midoriya. Always keep that in mind. Izuku sighed in relief, if there was anything he really had, it was imagination. Alright, will do. He took a breath and was about to walk over to the edge until once again, Animus spoke up. Hold it. Animus ordered, to which Izuku did as he was about to step up on the ledge. He lowered his leg and looked down to the medallion. What's wrong? Ember then spoke up after she giggled. Master, if you want to be the elemental guardian, you have to at least look the part, you know. Suo, step away from the ledge. Alright then. Izuku followed the fire elemental's order as he took a few steps back and stopped. What do you mean, look the part? As he finished asking, the medallion suddenly levitated off his chest as it began to grow abnormally bright. Not again. Izuku whimpered as he shut his eyes tightly, the medallion glowing to blinding levels for only a second before dimming down to its normal glow. Izuku moaned anxiously as he kept his eyes closed, shivering slightly. Tat. Now you look like the badass you were meant to be. Ember cheerfully voiced as then Izuku slowly opened his eyes to look down at himself. He gasped as his eyes widened in astonishment from what he was seeing himself now wearing. His messy green hair was combed into a small ponytail at the back. His face wearing a dark green eye mask that curved over the top of his nose before it went down to shield the upper parts of his cheeks, covering his freckles and reaching to a bit of his forehead. His body now donning a smooth fabric dark green colored buttoned long coat that went down to his ankles and had the medallion shape on the back in white, having the elemental symbols visible along the inner sides of it as well, the part of the waist down flowing elegantly with the wind to show emerald colored pants. His hands wearing thin dark green leather gloves and on his feet were green men's zip-up boots. Whoa. Izuku was speechless to say the least, stunned by his change of attire. An attire that he can immediately label as his hero costume. Well, what do you think? Animus asked for herself and her family. Izuku was still taking in his new appearance as he moved his arms in front of them, turning them slightly with a grin on his face, getting a good feel of the clothing as the attire definitely felt like a hero costume. He grinned down at the medallion and nodded. I love it. He finally replied enthusiastically. Excellent. Because this will be your appearance as the elemental guardian. The clothing was created to withstand the elements when you use them. So they will not burn, dirty, get wet, etc., etc. Izuku continued to look amazed at his appearance, his fists clenching and unclenching as he looked at the gloves he was wearing, everything having a firm, yet slightly loose fit to him for him to move well. Wow. He finished his admiration as he had a confident smile and look on his face and began to walk back to the ledge to stand on top of it. He still felt nervous when looking down to the street below. But he believed in himself as the elementals believed in him. He would not let them down. Izuku took a deep breath to ease his nerves, still looking down and his fingers curling by his sides. So. I just call whichever one of you out and imagine how I want use the element, right? He asked, a pendant around his neck, needing one last assurance from the life elemental. That is correct. And, try to stay calm, young Midoriya. Using the elements in a panic state will only hinder you. And it'd be bad to lose our new guardian so soon. Animus was heard chuckling at her humorous remark, to which Izuku pouted as he deadpanned. Thanks a lot for that, Animus. That really helps. Izuku sighed. Oh, you will be fine, my child. We believe in you to pull through after all. Izuku could not stay mad for long after hearing her say that. Alright. He let out a deep breath as he closed his eyes for only a moment. He clenched his fists as he moved forward enough so that his toes were over the edge, looking down to the ground once more with a bit more bravery and determination in his eyes. Here goes nothing. He then closed his eyes tightly as his lips pressed together. And slowly, he fell forward. Izuku opened his eyes as he saw the ground and people below nearing swiftly closer, a few civilians screaming as they saw the teen falling. Oh my god. Is he crazy? Were a couple of words that could be heard from the people pointing at him in the air. Izuku gasped as his eyes widened as impact was fast approaching. Though he did not let himself completely panic as he then shifted his body in the air to have his feet pointing to the ground. Atmos. Izuku called out in his head. Immediately the medallion glowed a deep green, signifying Atmos had placed the element of air in his hands to control, and that's where Izuku's imagination came into play. A small cyclone of air instantly appeared under Izuku. As he neared the ground, he leaned forward and took flight as he curved up before hitting the pavement and began to fly along the streets, going between vehicles as he shouted in excitement and relief. Anybody that heard and saw the boy gasped and gazed in shock and astonishment at the air-manipulating male. Izuku grinned as he looked up at his side to see shorter buildings' rooftops by him. He pulled out of the streets and went to one of the rooftops, the cyclone dispersing a couple feet off the ledge, letting Izuku fall the tiny distance onto the ledge before he quickly bolted across the rooftop. Seeing a vent in the way on the roof, Izuku smirked as he knew how to get past them with no problem at all. Shade. The medallion gem glowed a pure black before he came up to the vent, still running straight towards it. When Izuku ran into the vent that would have hit his upper body, he suddenly dissolved into shadows, his legs still seen running as he ran through it. After going through, he instantly materialized back and chuckled as he continued to bolt across the top of the building. With no hesitation, he stepped up onto the ledge and leaped off, letting himself fall for a second before he extended a hand pointing under him. Lassus. The gemstone glowed a bright blue before ice began to form into a slide. Izuku curled up as he landed on his bottom on the slide, curving it up to launch him back high in the air. Screaming in enjoyment as he did. As he stopped rising in the air, Izuku extended his arms out. Ember. The gem glowed red as fire immediately covered Izuku's hands, the ice slide now turning into ice particles as the element had been changed. On. Blast off. He shouted before thrusted his hands down and was now a rocket as he flew high throughout Musatafu. Gyahe. Citizens from the streets below could see the blazing flames coming off the boy, some immediately beginning to pull out their phones and cameras to record or take photos of the unknown hero or villain. They weren't so sure yet. Among the crowd was a teenage girl with brown eyes, shoulder-length brown hair and faded pink ovals on her cheeks, seemingly on a grocery errand as she was holding bags in her hands. She was looking up at the green-haired male in a stunned manner. Whoa. Don't think I've seen that hero before. Is he new? Izuku shouted between laughing hysterically. After flying for a few seconds, he then began to curve upwards towards another tall building's rooftop when approaching it. As he reached the rooftop, the flames on his hands extinguished as soon as he put his feet on the ledge. The gem on the amulet going back to a glowing white. Izuku hopped off the ledge and onto the roof, now a panting mess from the mass amount of adrenaline flowing through him. He groaned in relief as he fell back to sit against the ledge, taking the time to get over the high of successfully testing the uses of his elemental powers. And it was safe to say, Izuku was far from disappointed. He chuckled faintly as he brought the medallion to look it straight in the gem with a grin on his face. You guys are the best. Animus was heard chuckling before responding to the boy's compliment. Well, you most certainly had a lot of fun, huh? You are already proving your ability to wield the elements. I told you it was simple enough. Izuku nodded with a hum. At first I was expecting myself to be crying the whole time. But now that I did it, it just felt natural. It felt amazing. Well, this is your destiny, young Midoriya. So of course it would feel natural. It only makes sense. Izuku chuckled again as he began to get back onto his feet. If you say so. We know so. Animus quickly replied confidently. Izuku smiled gently at the white gem after hearing that. I know you do. As soon as the moment was peaceful between him and the elementals, he gasped lightly as he perked up when he began to hear sirens coming from somewhere. He turned to look over the edge towards the direction of the sirens. He then gasped sharply upon hearing what sounded like gunshots echoing through the sky. Oh no. That can't be good. Well, master, what are you waiting for? Shade spoke up with a chuckle right after. Izuku looked to the medallion in confusion, shaking his head as he did. What do you mean? Seriously, master? Ember spoke up in a deadpan voice. Get down there and go some bad guy ass. What do you think we mean? The fire elemental complained with a huff. Izuku winced at the frustration audible in her voice. His chest immediately beginning to ache as he thought about heading straight into danger on the first day. But am I ready? I just started using. You're ready, my child. Anima spoke up once more. You have already proven you have it takes to use the elements, so all you need now is your courage to guide you. Izuku went silent as he stared at the medallion, still looking slightly nervous, but not as much as he was at first. Maybe another hero. Why? No, remember what I said to you. The world has no time to wait for a hero who can help them this very instant. You can do it, young Midoriya. Believe in yourself and do what you were born to do. Go, be a hero, and show the world the glory of the elementals and their guardian. It took Izuku a few seconds for a grin to slowly come back to his face, and his body moved to get himself to stand on the ledge, looking to where he could hear the activity. He looked up with determination in his eyes. Right. I can do this. I know I can. Izuku clenched a gloved fist by his side. Thank you, Animus. I'm sorry I keep relying on you guys to pull me out of a rut. It is okay, that is one of the reasons why we are here and you are most welcome, my child. Now, get moving, Guardian. They need you. The green-haired teen needed no further instructions as he nodded, closing his eyes as he took a deep calming breath before stepping off the rooftop. His first duty as a hero in his own right has commenced. Chapter 6. Deku's debut. I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. Were Izuku's frantic thoughts as he was falling back down towards the sidewalk of the building he had taken a break on. His eyes closed and the bottom of his coat flailing with the rough wind blowing against him. I can do this. Izuku shouted internally as his eyes shot open, his gaze having the fire of determination in them as his palms opened up by his sides. Let's go, Ember. The medallion glowed red as Ember was heard giggling in the Guardian's mind. Aye, boss man. Ember shouted as her bright flames erupted in Izuku's palms, the bottom of his wrists pressing against his hips. The words of the elemental family that were spoken to him back when he was in the medallion echoed in his head. It is your time, Izuku Midoriya. To show the world that you can and will become the greatest hero to ever live. The flames then began to shoot out of his palm before they expanded to engulf the boy in fire, Izuku now turning into a flying human fireball as he flew through the air at a swift speed towards the directions of the violent commotion. We got to hurry and get to a safe place, or else we'll have heroes on our asses soon enough. And who's the fucking genius who decided to use a moving truck as a getaway vehicle? One out of the 4 criminals that were in the back of the small speeding moving truck shouted in urgency, pedestrian cars being seen swerving off the road from the dangerous chase behind them. Each one of the criminals having a ski mask covering their face, wearing black clothing while 2 held AK-47's assault rifles, the other 2 having a MP5 submachine gun and Ithaca Model 37 shotgun, all having full duffel bags on their figures. They were currently crouched behind metal containers to use for cover as pistol bullets were flying at them one at a time. The man that spoke took a peek out of cover to fire a barrage of bullets towards the police cruisers tailing them. The surrounding crowds on the sidewalks can be heard screaming as they all scrambled for cover when hearing the rapid gunshots. For the last few minutes they had trouble getting away from the police, and the fact that heroes would be catching up soon was not helping with their anxiety. Oh god, oh god, oh god. One of the criminals was cradling his MP5 to his chest as he was trembling in fear. Why did I agree this? I'm such an idiot. This is impossible without a Quirk. The frightened gunman muttered to himself as he rocked his body back and forth slightly, breathing as if he was on the verge of hyperventilating. Arriving on the chase now was a news chopper, the aircraft flying at a distance and angle, so the cameraman in the back was able to record and broadcast the scene to the public. Alongside the cameraman was a female news reporter that had dark brown hair that was tied into a ponytail on the back of her head, wearing a navy suit jacket and pants with a white dress shirt underneath. We have just arrived overhead of the police chase, and I got to say, things are looking really rough for the police. It appears that no hero has arrived quite just yet to help out the situa. The reporter suddenly went silent as she spotted what looked like to be a huge orb of fire in the distance next to them. Her sight gazing curiously at the fireball, her hand holding the microphone by her mouth once more. Hey, look over there. What is that? The reporter instructed the cameraman impatiently as she pointed to Izuku, the camera quickly shifting away from the chase to set its view on him. A hero? The woman questioned in a whisper. Back with Izuku, the Guardian fireball was flying over buildings that were on the side of the streets the robbers were driving on. The news chopper not too far beside him. Well, they are in quite a pickle. Aurora sweetly spoke up as the elementals were also watching the scene through Izuku's sight. Oh, we have an AUDIENC look right, master. Lassus instructed enthusiastically as she could be heard clapping her ice hands together rapidly. Time to show them who the big guy in town is, eh, master? Hydran spoke next with a chuckle escaping him afterwards. Woo. Back in action after so long. Oh, how I miss the smell of sweet, sweet justice in the morning. Shade spoke next with a giddy cackle. Yeah. I'm all fired up now. Let's get him, master. Come on, come on. Ember's everlasting excited voice spoke up now as she let out a childish giggle. Normally, I'd tell the children to hush up and not get too riled up. Animus was then heard speaking, letting out a satisfied hum. But I think I will make an exception today since I am rather excited as well, and it is a big day for all of us after all. Now, do make those fools regret committing such havoc, young Midoriya. Oh, and do put on a good show. Glancing back to the chase after taking a glimpse over at the news chopper. The boy not needing much more encouragement than that to commence with his first act of heroism, the elemental's energy, was really rubbing off on him as he felt confident in his abilities because of them. He smirked as he nodded down at the medallion, looking back to the police chase before boosting himself down towards the scene. I hear you all loud and clear. I have never seen any kind of fire quirk that was able to make someone fly. Who is this hero anyway? Is he new? The reporter commented and questioned as herself. The cameraman, as well as the rest of Japan that was watching the news, witnessed Izuku rush down towards the chase. Oh shit. We got a hero. One of the other criminals called out as Izuku was now flying above the police cruisers that was chasing after them. The men, excluding the cowering one, got behind cover to quickly reload their weapons before sticking out again to aim their weapons at Izuku. Crap. Izuku flew down to one of the cop cars below him, extinguishing his flames to land on the hood, landing in a kneeling position before quickly standing up, bringing his palms together and staring at the men who were now pulling at the triggers of their weapons when they got a good aim at the teen. The two officers in the car looking at the unknown hero in confusion, but did not focus long on him as the officer in the passenger seat spotted what the criminals were up to. Incoming fire. The passenger shouted as he braced for bullets to rain in on them, the driver ducking behind the wheel. Aurora. Izuku then extended his hands outwards to his sides as a bright wall of solid light expanded in front of him. The bullets stopping when they impacted the light wall and slowly sunk inside it. The goons firing until they ran out of rounds. They were shocked to see that Izuku and the cruiser were perfectly fine, and the bullets fading away along with a wall of light when Izuku cancelled the ability. What? Now the man is using another quirk. The reporter commented out excitedly, a grin on her face as the news crew was amazed at the Guardian, and the reporter was sure so was their audience. The getaway driver of the crew witnessed the action from a side door mirror, his eyes widened in shock along with his other heist members. How did H shit? The man exclaimed as he saw he was coming up on a three-way street, quickly turning the steering wheel to make a sharp turn left, skidding as he turned to continue down a straight road. That was close. The driver sighed in relief before focusing on the road once more. Shade. Izuku then jumped off the police cruiser and turned into a black mist before beginning to fly to follow the getaway vehicle and its crew. The men in the back eyes showing that they were beginning to fear the hero they were dealing. What the hell? There's no goddamn way that guy is human. The leader shouted as he fired more rounds of his Alaska at the mist swerving side to side to intimidate them, which worked perfectly as their movements became more erratic. The bullets whistled right past Shadow Izuku with ease, feeling no pain or being affected by the many bullets that were hitting the mist. He flew to the top of the truck and materialized back into his body, doing a roll and stopped in a perfect kneeling position. Whoa. Had no idea I can move like that. Pretty sure I couldn't before. Izuku thought before quickly standing and looking towards the front of the truck. The truck was about to drive over a manhole that led to the sewers below in a few seconds. The Guardian grinned as he nodded before extending a hand towards the manhole. Hydran. His fingers slightly curled as the heavy manhole cover was beginning to shake for a second before blasting up in the air as a pillar of dirty water had bursted out of the hole and shot out like a geyser right in front of the moving truck. Ah. The driver exclaimed from the sudden sewer geyser that erupted in front of the truck, not having the room to turn and avoid it, he unintentionally drove right into it. The deadly pressure of the water lifting the truck momentarily in the air, the men in the back hovered in the air for a split second before falling back on the floor with a loud thud and a pained groan escaping them. Meanwhile, Izuku sprung off the side of the truck when the truck rammed through the water. Lassus. He extended a hand out as he was falling to make an ice slide that curved downwards to the street, Izuku flipping in midair for his boots to meet the ice and slid down along it, the slide slowly approaching the ground as he remained following the moving truck. When the ice slide could not go any more lower, Izuku landed a foot on the solid ground immediately when doing so. The ice began to form at his feet. At the very next second, the road became ice ahead of Izuku, and he began to skate swiftly on the ice floor. The boy can be seen swerving and swaying side to side as he held his hands behind his back from the view of the news chopper, kicking his feet back smoothly and steadily. The Guardian keeping the ice floor growing just behind the moving truck. The cop cruisers skidding to a stop before they would come into contact with the ice in front of them, behind Izuku. The news crew in the air looked on down in astonishment as they could not believe what they were seeing below. I have no clue how to describe what I am seeing. So far this hero has displayed to us, the police and the criminals, that he has not just one or two, but 4 different quirks. And I have a feeling that ain't the end of it, ladies and gentlemen. Well, ain't you having a good time? Alva took his turn to speak up in an impressed tone. Mother did say to put on a good show, and what a thrilling one it is so far, master. Aurora responded ecstatically to her brother of lightning, also speaking to the Guardian. I'm trying my best, you're almost up, Galva, get ready. Izuku thought back before letting out a soft chuckle. His idea of a good show, messing with the criminals for a couple minutes to show off his powers and then bring them to justice. At your service. Alva replied, clearly enthusiastic about his time to shine. Izuku then extended a hand in front of him to form another ice slide facing up towards the truck ahead of him. Here we go. He shouted as he leaned forward and stuck his rear back as he went up the slide at a high speed. Flying back into the air, and he extended his hands to the ground. Now. Right on cue, the medallion glowed a dark purple as purple electricity shot out of his hands and fingers tips to the ground. The Guardian now hovering quickly towards the top of the moving truck once more. If it were not for the criminals' masks, the boy would be seeing them agape at the sight before them. The criminals have long lost their weapons during the rough lifting the sewage geyser had given them. The lightning on Izuku's hands died down as the teen landed on the truck and he dashed across the roof to jump off towards the front of the truck. Atmos. The driver looked up in utter shock to see the Guardian now surrounded by a cyclone of wind as he flew up ahead of them with haste. Time to finish this, ready Slate. Izuku called to the earth elemental. Always. The rough-voiced god replied as Izuku smirked and stopped his flight some distance ahead of the criminals at the middle of a 4th Street now. Standing tall as he had his back facing the fast-approaching truck, his head slightly turned to keep an eye on the vehicle. His right hand lifted up beside him and held it there, waiting till the last moment before the truck would hit him, and he thrusted his hand up slightly. Following his hand movement, 2 pillars of the concrete road rose up to the lift up the front and the back of the bulky vehicle, bringing it to a complete stop in the air with the tires still spinning, the driver getting knocked out as his head pounded against the steering wheel, honking the horn once, from the sudden stop. The goons in the back screaming as they momentarily tumbled to slam against the far wall, the impact only severe enough to have them rendered unconscious as well. Izuku stared at his work, maybe a little overboard, well done. A bright smile on his face as that glorious feeling of doing a heroic duty flooded him. His body momentarily shivering in response to that feeling, as well as the adrenaline coursing through him. His breathing was slightly paced. Feels good, doesn't it, my child? Animus broke the silence for Izuku as he snapped out of his mesmerized state, looking to the now white glowing medallion. Why yeah. It feels amazing, Animus. He replied softly, now hearing blaring police sirens coming closer to his direction. Excellent. Now. Look around you. Animus instructed kindly, Izuku obeying as his head looked up. He gasped as his eyes slowly widened, his body tensing at what he was now seeing. Tears were quick to form in Izuku's eyes as that powerful feeling in his heart increased drastically. His legs lightly shaking from the effect. Surrounding the boy on the sidewalks were hordes of civilians that gazed at the Guardian in astonishment. Several flashes of the pedestrians' cameras and cell phones lit up brightly around him, a lot of them also recording him as well. Izuku looked to the sky when the news chopper was hovering up over him, the cameraman and reporter seen poking out of the open side door to look down at him. Up to Izuku's left, a digital billboard that was attached to a roof of a shop showed the camera's close-up point of view of him. Now seeing himself looking emotional as the tears rolled under his mask and down his cheeks. All of Japan was now looking at today's new and unexpected hero. At the UA's Heights Alliance dormitory building, we see Class 3 in the lounging area of their home. Looking stunned at what they had just witnessed on the news, all at a loss for words from the display the Elemental Guardian had put on. Never have any of them seen or heard of someone having and manifesting so many element-based quirks at a time. What the hell? The rough voice on one Katsuki Bakugo was the first to speak up in disbelief, he himself unable to resist the temptation to get lost in shock along with his classmates. We see Todoroki out of his usual stoic expression as he was watching the news report in surprise. He used fire. And ice. He thought as he watched a teary-eyed Guardian on the screen. Sitting in the middle of the couch was Achako, who had arrived back at the dorms not too long ago. Just catching the beginning of Izuku's first duty as an assigned hero from the gods. The gravity quirk girl had the tip of straw from a juice box between her lips, having remained frozen like that through the whole ordeal. That's the guy. From earlier. I think the world may come to like their new hero. Animus softly spoke in Izuku's mind. If anyone could see the life elemental now, they'd see her lips curved into a confident smirk, and her children having ecstatic grins on their own. The family feeling proud of their new master. Chapter 7. Arrival of a Pro. The elementals allowed the green-haired teen to indulge in the overwhelming glory that was easily seen on his face. Izuku still shedding tears along with light whimpers escaping him as he trembled from the fulfillment that struck him hard because of the amazed and awestruck civilians that surrounded him. After half a minute of letting the boy enjoy the sights all around him, the elementals began to sense a powerful presence coming their way, forcing them to break Izuku out of his trance. "Are you ready to go home, young Midoriya?" Animus questioned the guardian softly, the caring voice of the mother elemental, bringing Izuku back to earth as he looked down to the pendant hanging on his chest that was glowing a pure white. Izuku took one last gaze around him as he heard cheers echoing around him, flashes still going off from the cameras in most of the pedestrians' hands. It was the cheers. Those kinds of reactions was enough to make his legs nearly give out on him. It was all enough to tell him that the young man they were seeing before all of them was a hero. Izuku lifted his right hand to wipe away the tear trails going down his cheeks. His left hand coming up to lightly grasp at the medallion, at his new family members, this being the only way he knew how to show any sign of affection for the ones who had chosen him to become their guardian, their warrior. The gods. Who have aided in allowing him to achieve his one and only lifelong dream. It may not be the proper way in the perspective of current society. But he took the elementals' words to heart when they told him that he would be the one to change. No, to better the age of heroes. He may be a vigilante, but he'll let his intended actions do all the talking and convincing for him. Izuku slowly nodded his head as he flashed a quivering smile down at Gemstone. His right hand lowering down from its finished action, let out a sniffle when nodding his head more rapidly for a second, and let out a soft confirming hum. "Yeah, I'm ready." Izuku closed his eyes as he held the medallion closer to his chest. No words were able to describe just how grateful the green-haired boy was. How could ever possibly repay them? "Atmos. Let's go." Izuku whispered as he had a peaceful look on his face, a proper warm smile on his lips, tears continuing to roll down his cheeks. "At once, master." The air elemental replied as the gemstone then glowed green before suddenly a strong gust of wind suddenly flowed around Izuku, his small ponytail waving at the back of his head and the bottom of his coat wildly flailing about. A few seconds after the strong wind appeared, the air became visible as it showed to be a thick gray mist, beginning to surround Izuku from the feet and quickly rised from the ground to hide the guardian within the air circle. In the matter of nearly 10 seconds, the air suddenly shot up swiftly to form a twister with the clouds above, but remained in place from where Izuku was standing. The strong wind beginning to blow outwards to its nearby surroundings. The crowd, the news team that was still in the air in the news chopper, Class 3A, and every other viewer that was watching the scene from their homes, let out surprised gasps as they saw a literal mini tornado sudden appear before their eyes. The crowd around the area needing to shield themselves from the strong wind as they let out exclaims, muttering of confusion coming from the lot of them, and the news chopper was luckily out of the way of the cyclone, only causing the aircraft to get pushed back slightly. The winds thankfully were light enough for the pilot to easily remain in control of the air vehicle after the push. After about only 5 seconds of that happening, the bottom of the cyclone began to slowly disperse, starting from the bottom and working its way up to the clouds above. Izuku was nowhere in sight once the air spread out to reveal where he previously was, which had the audience bewildered from his sudden mysterious disappearance. "Where did he go?" the news reporter exclaimed as she tried to look around for the hero, along with the crowd, for the guardian. Only for them to not get even a glimpse of him anywhere. They then watched as the cyclone swiftly dispersed up to the clouds and finally came to its end, the funnel in the cloud above slowly disappearing and returning the cloud to normal. The audience was baffled by what they had just witnessed, the majority having trouble comprehending what they saw Izuku and the air elemental do. The news reporter was quick to break out of her mesmerized state as she then caught sight something on the spot where Izuku was. "What is that?" she softly asked no one in particular, which was heard by the cameraman as he turned the camera's eye view towards where she was looking. What was now seen in the middle of the crowded four-way street was the emblem of the elemental medallion etched in green on the concrete, the same emblem that was seen on the back of Izuku's guardian long coat. The crowd was quick to give into their curiosity as they began to walk right on the street to get a closer look at the emblem. The crowd gazing down and thought at it, silence being all that was heard as everyone had trouble getting out of their bewilderment to speak up, but finally, one middle-aged man did. "Sim. Here I am." The middle-aged pedestrian was suddenly interrupted from speaking up as he, along with his fellow civilians, jumped and backed up when a tall, muscular man suddenly popped out of the ground from the middle of the emblem. The man stancing when he landed his feet on the concrete with a strong posture and his hands pressing against his sides, as he had a bright smile on his face. The pro-hero that had suddenly appeared at the scene sported bright blonde hair that was styled into a cowlick going up at the front and blue eyes. His face looking rather cartoonish. The hero looked to be in his early 20s. His hero costume having a thick orange flowing cape with a hood attached to it, as well as orange gloves on his hands. His upper body wearing a tight white shirt with gold lining that hugged his muscular figure, emphasizing said muscles. On the chest, where the numbers 1 million on the shoulders were golden plates with 2 green linings going along it. Below the shirt was a green solid belt that made a V shape at the front. On his lower body were dark blue pants and white boots that went up to just below his knees. "Lemillion." One of the civilians exclaimed in glee as the whole crowd smiled, immediately recognizing who the pro-hero was in front of them. The pro-hero, now identified as Lemillion, aka Mirio Tagada, gave a thumbs with a wink at the civilians before him, letting out a grunt as he thrusted the fist that stuck its thumb up down in front of him. "Fear not, citizens. Help has arrived. Now where are the others?" He suddenly questioned as he put a hand just above his eyes side as he tried to look around for his allies. "Oh dear, I think I may have gotten ahead of myself again." He then shrugged as he looked to one of the civilians before him. "Anyway, where is the trouble?" Lemillion asked as he smiled down at the crowd, waiting patiently for an answer. The pro-hero's question was only responded to with awkward or nervous groans from the crowd, to which the response had him immensely confused. His head tilting slightly as he asked an additional question. "What's the matter?" Finally, a young woman from the crowd took it upon herself to properly answer the blonde hero. "Well, I'm afraid that someone has already beaten you to it, Lemillion, sir." The woman pointed behind the hero when peering around one of his sides. "Is that so?" Lemillion's voice slowly went quiet as when he turned to face whatever the female pedestrian was pointing at behind him. Oh dear. He was briefly surprised to see the getaway moving truck stuck in the air by the 2 concrete pillars Izuku had summoned up, the driver still knocked out in the driver's seat and the criminals in the back still unconscious as well. Walking up to it till a few feet away. "I don't believe I know anyone who can summon up concrete that small, not even Cementus can do that," the pro-hero thought as he stared curiously at the scene. He returned his attention back to the woman. "Do you have any idea who could have done this, ma'am?" The woman shook her head as a partial reply to Lemillion's question. "I don't think any of us know who that person was. I can't speak for everyone else, but I thought he was new hero, and..." The woman's response trailed off as she looked to the ground off to her side. "And?" Lemillion raised a curious brow at the young woman's sudden stop. "Well..." She then pointed to the elemental medallion emblem that was by them, to which Lemillion followed her point and looked slightly astonished when seeing the symbol etched on the ground, letting out a quiet gasp as his eyes slightly widened. He left that in his leave. The pro-hero looked to the civilian as he gave her nod before walking off towards the insignia. "Thank you, ma'am." The blonde man walked up to the emblem, stopping just by where the fire element symbol was, and began to analyze what he was seeing at his feet. "What is this?" he whispered to himself as he lifted a hand to lightly grip his chin, now looking at the other elemental symbols that went around the insignia. "Lemillion." A female voice called out from the sky, another pro-hero, though this one was a curvy young woman that had long blue hair that twisted around itself at the waist and shaped into spiral horns on top of her head, also having a pale skin complexion and bright blue eyes. Her own hero costume being a skin-tight blue, green and white bodysuit that emphasized her killer curves, and on her arms were golden gauntlets with some green material spiraling around them, as well as some of the same material spiraling in 2 loops around her ankles. The young female hero was giving off light shockwaves as she landed gently on the feet when stopping her flight in front of Mirio. "Ah, Najire, you finally made it," Lemillion voiced as he faced the woman in front of him. The young woman, named Najire Hado, let out a sigh as she shook her when approaching one of 2 of her partners. "Just once, I'd wish you'd wait for us. It makes me wonder if you're trying to make our team into the big one instead of the big 3. Lemillion let out an embers chuckle as he scratched one of his cheeks when looking awkwardly off to the side. "Sorry about that, Najire, but no hero must wait when there's trouble afoot." He suddenly shot the finger off his cheek and pointed the finger in the air, striking a heroic pose. Najire let out a soft giggle as she then walked beside him. Still the same old thing to say every time. She then spotted the emblem that was on the ground in front of them, looking at the insignia with confusion. "I'm gonna take a guess and say that this wasn't here before," she asked Lemillion when turning her head to her side to look at the blonde hero, pointing to the symbol. Lemillion hummed in denial as he shook his head when crossing his arms, looking down once more. I'm afraid not, one of the civilians explained to me that whoever stopped these evildoers. He then gestured his head towards the moving truck near them. Najir taking a glance towards it. He seemed to have left this here when he took his leave. Is that so? She then looked to the young woman Lemillion had spoken to, walking up to her quickly and held her shoulders as she suddenly became gleeful. An expression that seemed to catch the pedestrian off guard and rendered her body tense as she sweat dropped. Tell me, whoever this person was it him that caused that little tornado earlier? She asked in curiosity, yet excitement. The blue-haired having caught sight of the air spiral while on her way over here. Why yes, I don't know how, but he somehow formed a twister around him and a few seconds later he was just gone when it died down. The civilian replied anxiously. Najir had to suppress a squeal as she was ecstatic at the knowledge of someone having a quirk capable of such a neat trick. Wow, he sounds so strong. I wonder what else he can do. She suddenly spun around in a 180 to face away from the women. Najir. Lemillion suddenly called out to his ally, which pulled her out of her daze, as he was crouched right by the emblem, looking intently at the air elemental symbol, keeping in mind what the civilian had said about Izuku creating a tornado to make himself vanish. Wind. No. Air. Upon looking at the other symbols along the insignia, somewhat, he began to understand just who exactly they were dealing with. A flame. A water droplet. A mountain. Lightning bolt. The sun and moon. And a snowflake. He knew that if he had witnessed Izuku's display of his power, he would understand this all much better, but he was getting gist of it. Najir, seeing her friend in such deep thought, had her concerned as she approached his side, bending her knees as she kneeled beside him, her butt coming close to her heels. You alright, Lemillion? You're surprisingly quiet. Can it be? Lemillion softly uttered as he looked intensely at each of the symbols. What's up? Najir asked curiously as her gaze followed his own at the symbols in front of them. Well, this is only my guess. But whoever this person is, I think his quirk allows him to control elements. Judging from the symbols, look. He then pointed to each symbol individually as he began to list them to Najir, to which she listened intently and followed his point. There's fire, water, earth, air, darkness, judging from the moon, lightning, ice and light, judging from the sun, and the tree. I have no idea. I think if we had witnessed what everyone else had, we'd be in for quite the show as they were. Najir looked in disbelief as she took in his hypothesis. It did make sense to her. How else would anyone be able to form a tornado to use it in a way like he did? Wow. Talk about powerful. Were the first thoughts of excitement to come to her mind when hearing that explanation. Of Class 3A. After Izuku had disappeared from the scene when the tornado had revealed him to be gone, the screen to the class's television shut off immediately, it being Katsuki who had turned it off as he was gripping the remote tightly in his hand. The whole class was still in a state of confusion as of right now, not a single soul in the lounging area currently able to escape from it. Was this a pro hero they were just seeing now or making his debut? Or was it something else? The images of the green-haired guardian stuck to Katsuki. That green hair mixed with black. That detail alone was enough to make the spiky blonde's blood boil slightly in anger, the teen letting out a quiet growl as he gritted his teeth softly. Why does the sight of that guy piss me off? Chapter 8. An old threat. Of Class 3A. The entire class could not determine the amount of time they had themselves staring into a black television screen, locking eyes with their own bewildered faces in the television's reflection. Out of all the students, Denki was the first one to speak up, a shaky finger lifting up as he had difficulty coming out with his words. I ain't the only one that's seen that. Alright. You all saw that dude using 8 different quirks, right? His voice began to sound a little more frantic. A particular scene stuck to his mind of the green-haired guardian, emitting what looked like to be purple electricity off his hands. The guy gave off so much electricity. And yet, he was still fine. Were the electric teen's thoughts. For real? Anyone know who that guy is? He must be a hero or something. Mina Ishido spoke out to her classmates as well, unable to fight a slight grin from appearing on her face, as she remembered how the guardian had used his darkness abilities. Dude used a pretty sweet way of dodging bullets. He didn't appear to look like any hero I know of. Momo spoke up as well, looking utterly confused as she could not recall there being a hero who could use so many elements. Sai following right after she had spoke. He might be one, today might just be the day he's making himself known. The frog quirk girl responded, bringing an index finger to her bottom lip in a thoughtful manner. That can't be right, you would think we'd hear some kind of story about someone having 8 different quirks, don't you think? Itsuka responded questionably to Tsai. I mean, I think I state the obvious when I say that would be a pretty big deal in today's world. It's already getting too noisy in here. Shinso voiced to himself as he was not too concerned over what had just happened like the rest of his classmates, the purple-haired teen now taking his leave from the lounging room and heading back to his dorm room before it got too loud for his liking. Yeah, she does have a point, guys. With the number of quirks he has as awesome as those, I'm pretty sure we'd at least hear some news about someone like him. Ijiro responded, the boy now looking down in thought from his seat on the sofa, his arms resting on his lap. He lifted that concrete from the ground with just lifting his hand. Not to mention all the other stuff that he did. And that emblem that was on his back and on the ground. I'm sure I saw a raindrop. A lightning bolt. A flame. And a mountain. That was the guy from earlier. Achako said with a tone and look that showed she was still a bit out of it. Her words immediately grabbing the attention of the other teens around her, giving her curious looks, except for Bakugo as he just looked slightly pissed off. What? You already know the asshole. Bakugo immediately was the first one to question the spaced-out brunette in a frustrated voice that had the girl nearly jump out of her skin in a cold sweat and turn her head to face him. And no, what I meant by that was. Well. The anxious girl pressed her lips tightly together as she looked down to her lap. When I was gone for the snack run earlier. I saw the same guy flying through the air with fire coming out of just his hands. He wasn't in a fireball like he just was. Honestly. He kind of reminded me of your own Quirk a little bit there, Bakugo. Don't compare me that guy. He huffed angrily before he looked away, closing his eyes and taking a deep breath to calm his nerves of what Achako said. In recent months, the blonde young man had been working on learning to keep his temper in check. With his now more developed and slightly matured mind, after the many years of letting himself be a loose cannon. He had began to finally see just how dangerous he could potentially be if he does not cool it down at this point. It was a move that went very much praised and encouraged by the whole class. Ease up there, Bakugo. Toru began to attempt to ease the short-tempered blonde, her invisible hand lightly patting at his back, causing the boy to grumble and roll his shoulder that caused the invisible girl to stop her action. Ijiro's sweat dropped as the blonde's sudden shout had brought him back into reality, looking by his shoulder to see his best friend's agitated tick mark on his forehead. The hardened Quirk user giving an awkward chuckle at the display as he hesitantly smiled. Yeah dude, we're sure she meant nothing by that. I'm fine. He growled as he began to stand up from the sofa and make his way back to room, brushing a hand through his hair as he walked off. Whatever, I'm out of here. He mumbled as he left the room with his hand stuffed in his pocket, looking to the floor as he went into thought again. That guy may have all those fancy quirks at his disposal. But he's still not stronger than me. He growled internally, the impenetrable pride still very much present inside the explosive Quirk user. But how come that ain't why he has me so irritated? The class waited till Bakugo was completely out of the room before they sighed in relief, thankful that he had not been enraged enough to cause any kind of property damage to the dormitory. As always, he hates being thought of in the same league as someone. Itsuka sighed as she shook her head. That hothead. Enki chuckled anxiously before he decided to add something to the orange-haired girl's comment. We can cut the guy some slack, I mean, he's definitely made some improvement on himself, he ain't the same as he used to be back when we first got into UA. Ayaka was then heard chuckling as she had something to add to that statement, twirling one of her earphone jacks with an index finger. Yeah, it was like all we heard from the guy was him screaming angrily. I swear he could even surpass my speakers in volume. At that comment, the whole class, excluding Tokoyami and Shadow, though Tokoyami did give a small smirk and a scoff, could be heard chuckling and giggling as they began to reminisce and recall memories of the past Bakugo and their first year of becoming heroes in training at UA High. Tokoyami looked to the half-and-half Quirk user to his side, leaning back into the sofa with his arms crossed onto his chest. So, what do you think on the matter, Shadow? You seemed especially baffled when seeing the hero show off his ability to use both fire and ice. Shadow did not show much emotion with what he had to reply with to the host of Dark Shadow. I'll admit, I was surprised, initially. As far as I knew I was the only one who could use those quirks. Tokoyami chuckled at the response, giving his good friend a light pat on the shoulder. I'm sure you'd both get along just fine. Not that I'm only saying this about you. When taking his hand back, he then leaned forward to rest his shoulders on his lap, looking down with a serious expression on his crow head. One of his quirks is sort of like mine as well. It's obvious there is more than meets the eye with that guy. He has the ability to control shadows. He brought a palm into his sight before he lightly clenched a fist. It can't just be that he can become a shadow. With what he had demonstrated with his other abilities. I just can't help but feel there's much more to it. So much more to him. Shadow nodded in agreement, his comrade not being the only one who sensed such a thing from the Guardian. Unbeknownst to each other, they all began to think the same thing about the green-haired vigilante. Yeah. You and me both. But Izuku. Back at the apartment complex where the Midoriya household resided, a sudden strong force of wind began to swirl around a spot on the structure's rooftop. A 7-foot hump of wind swiftly formed on the spot of the roof, swirling rapidly for a couple seconds before it burst when it dispersed to show the elemental guardian was now standing in said spot. The young man's head was still face down, and his hand was still lightly clenched around the pendant by his chest. Remaining that way for some time silently, the elementals letting the boy indulge in his emotions as long as he wanted now that they were in the clear. After a while, the boy let out a calm breath as he sniffled once, wiping whatever tears were by his eyes after he had removed the eye mask off his face. "You feeling alright there, master?" Ember being the first of the elementals to speak to the guardian in a patient manner. Izuku was silent for a few seconds after the fire woman had asked her question, then suddenly letting out a soft chuckle which surprised the elemental gods. "Alright. I feel great." The boy suddenly uttered in a raised voice, his arms pumping the air with the mask still in one hand. The boy now pacing back and forth as he chuckled a little more and ran a hand through his hair, the teen running on pure adrenaline currently. "I did it. I actually did my first duty as an unofficial hero, but a hero duty nonetheless." The boy then went on an excited muttering rant as he continued to pace around the large rooftop. Izuku able to tune out the voices of the gods as he did so. Well, that was quite an unexpected response. Admos being the next to speak out of her family in slight surprise, unable to help but chuckle proudly as they all watched the boy seemingly get lost into his own little world. Ember now heard giggling before she spoke up next. "I told you all he was gonna kick bad guy ass." Alvis scoffed at his fire sister's comment before he too spoke up. "Oh, hush Ember, we did not even doubt the master's ability to get the job done for a second, so don't make it sound as such." Lassus then chuckled at her lightning brother's own comment before adding her to the subject. "Haha, he's got you there sis." If anyone else could see her now, the fire elemental would be seen pouting as she replied in disappointment to her two siblings ganging up on her. "Oh, you two can just kiss my fiery ass." The mother then intervened before the elemental children had the chance to escalate their conversation to a shouting match. "That is enough, my children. We knew young Midoriya would not fail us in the first place, so there is no need to begin starting a pointless squabble amongst yourselves." Animus lectured her children in an authoritative motherly tone, which worked wonders on subduing the elementals' aggressive behavior towards each other. The two females responding in a typical teenage grumble, while the lightning entity replied in a slightly ashamed tone. "Sorry, mother." Animus let out a deep sigh as Shade and Aurora could not hold back their amusement of the situation, the former heard quietly snickering, while the latter had a suppressed giggle escape her. Shade now speaking up in a teasing sing-songy whisper to the lectured elementals. "You got in trouble." "Shut up Shade." Ember silently retorted before a huff was heard from her. "My son, do not make me lash my authority out on you as well. Because I promise you, I will." Shade was then heard raspily and quietly eeping as he ceased his soft cackling, not daring to test his mother's threat and most especially, her patience. "Apologies mother." "Thank you. Now then, young Midoriya." Upon hearing his surname being called by the mother elemental, Izuku immediately snapped out his rant and looked down to the medallion curiously. "Why yeah, Animus. Oh my, I kind of expected that I would have to call you a few more times before I finally got your attention." Animus stated teasingly, letting out a short giggle as the teen was quick to become flustered, bringing a hand to rub anxiously at the back of his head as he sweat dropped. Sorry about that. I tend to talk to myself a lot when I get excited about something," he responded in embarrassment. "We're well aware, so do not fret, my child. I was only teasing you. So, now that you calmed down a little, care to tell the depths of your feelings?" Animus softly questioned, the boy tempted to go on another amazed-fueled rant again, but was able to control himself enough to prevent that course of action. Izuku then gazed off towards the city with a warm smile shaped on his lips, walking to stand by close to the edge. "Well, like I said before, I feel pretty great. Well, honestly, no words can describe what I feel really. I'm feeling fulfilled, excited, relieved, complete, and that's only naming a few of a multitude of the things I'm feeling." He chuckled softly, grasping at the medallion as he lifted it to look closely at the gemstones. I can't thank you all enough. You all gave me hope again. Made me forgive and forget all the years others have destroyed whatever fragment of my own hope I had. I'll never ever forget that. Thank you Animus. Exos. Everyone." The teen was threatening to shed tears once more, but refused to let them fall, wanting to look to the elementals with a brave face and wanting them to look at their chosen guardian just as he should be. His response having the gods rendered speechless. The medallion and its symbols began to glow and hum faintly, the elemental's bond with the green-haired teen beginning to grow more as they could feel his genuine trust, emotions, and even love towards the family present in his heart and voice. Back in the elemental's world for a moment, Animus brought a hand up to her chest as she had a pleasant smile form on her lips, the elemental children having smiles, smirks and grins on their own lips as they shared brief glances at each other before looking to the window that showed their elemental guardian, smiling confidently at them. You really have chosen the next worthy hero, haven't you, my love? The goddess of life thought to herself as she looked down to the smooth flowing grass of her home. Her smile weakening at what she had thought next. Hopefully, he'll be the one to finally defeat him. Moments after Izuku's disappearance. In a random sidewalk of Musatafu, a 6'3" tall man dressed in a black pea coat with dark brown khakis, dark Oxford shoes and a black Panama hat on his head was standing in the middle of an astonished crowd that looked up at a digital billboard that had the broadcast of Izuku's hero work displayed on it. After seeing Izuku had disappeared in a cyclone of air, the man immediately began to walk away down the sidewalk, furthering himself away from the loudly conversing crowd behind him. The unknown man looked to have deathly pale skin and crimson red eyes, locks of pure black hair sticking out from under his hat, his face donning a black medical face mask to hide his identity and the rest of his facial appearance. He then let out a quiet, sinister chuckle as he walked with his hands hiding within his coat pockets. Suddenly, his deep, mature voice spoke up, his head currently facing down to the concrete below. "So, you've finally chosen your next guardian to continue our little game." His head then looked up to reveal his eyes were now pure black, his mask shifting as he grinned wickedly under it. "Then let the games continue. My dear family." Chapter 9. Limitless Possibilities. After the weekend. Playing back on a tablet device was the news broadcast that had captured the elemental guardian's actions that were committed on the weekend during a high-speed chase. Holding the device while sitting down on a large leather rotating chair behind his desk was the principal of UA High School, Principal Nezu, a short humanoid animal-like creature with white fur all around him, with oval-shaped black eyes, and had a rather large scar traveling down on his right eye. The principal had the appearance of what seemed to be a mix of a bear, a dog, and a mouse, also having a long tail at his rear end, and donned a rather snazzy-looking suit set, excluding the jacket. The principal hummed in a curious manner as he watched the broadcast in its entirety, holding the tablet in one of his paws, while the other paw was lightly pressed on his chin. He then lightly gasped when seeing the green-haired vigilante had summoned a dark thick cyclone from the sky to envelope him and had made himself completely vanish from the public eye. He had seen all that he needed to see as he then put a stop to the video and began to open up a picture that showed the insignia of the elemental family, going quiet for a few seconds as he was examining it before he placed the tablet onto his desk and let out a soft sigh. "This is rather troublesome." The humanoid animal spoke up as he looked up at the only two people that were present within the principal's office, other than just himself sitting on the other side of his desk. "And you are sure that the other hero schools have not had any past students that possess these kinds of quirks, Mr. Ozawa?" The principal asked one of the two men that was closer to the right side of his desk. The man that was questioned first was Class 3A's homeroom teacher, Shota Ozawa. The messy black-haired man shook his head with a denying hum. "Yes sir, they all have assured me that they have checked their records and found nothing on anyone with these quirks that have ever joined their academies," Mr. Ozawa responded, then letting out a quiet scoff before resuming. "Though there were some who were wishing he had." The principal looked back down to the tablet after hearing the black-haired teacher, letting out another sigh as he eyed the picture on the device once more. "So we are dealing with a vigilante then." He looked back up to stare at the other man present in the room who was an extremely thin, skeletal-like man with long blonde. "All Might, you told me that young Tagada was the first hero to make it on the scene, was he able to find out anything else other than this?" Principal Nezu questioned as he showed the picture to the still #1 hero of the world. "I wish I can say yes to that sir, but sadly, no, he hasn't. Neither does he know what the symbol represents." All Might replied in a low tone, shaking his head twice as he was speaking. "I see, and there hasn't been any other sightings of this vigilante today or the rest of yesterday?" The principal questioned once more at the two men. "So far, no. But I have advised every hero agency to be on the lookout for him if he ever decides to make himself known anywhere in Japan," Ozawa replied. All Might adding in his own method of expanding the lookout for the teen guardian right after him. "I have also told Tsukauchi the same thing, so we will also have the authorities helping with keeping a watchful eye out." Nezu nodded in approval as he hummed and turned his chair around to face the window before dismounting it, bringing his paws together behind his back as he walked up to the large windows of his office. "Good work, I have a feeling we are gonna need every helping hand we can get if we are to catch this individual. With what he has shown he can do so far, I can only imagine he will be very elusive." The animal-like humanoid huffed softly though his nose. Yes, he may have done a noble thing and stopped those gunmen from completing their mission. Fulfilled a duty of a hero. But he still went against the law about it. Also, I have a very unsettling feeling about him. The two pro-heroes teachers were quick agree with the principal, not having a reason to disagree with him. They were appreciative of the actions of the teen, but the fact remained that he had broken an important law that all civilians that have manifested quirks need to follow. But what the principal had stated last had them immediately becoming curious. Izawa's eyes slightly narrowing at his superior. Why do you say that, sir? The erasure quirk user questioned. I can't really explain it right now, but I just can't help but feel that there is more to his powers. More to him in general. Maybe even something else. The principal momentarily chuckled lowly as he shrugged and shook his head. But who knows, despite my intelligence, even I can be prone to overthinking sometimes. Before the teachers could comment on his words, the bell indicating that the lunch period had come to an end suddenly had rung out, the meeting forced to have to come to an end. Oh dear, is it that time already? My, time truly does fly by, doesn't it? The mouse bear dog humanoid uttered before letting out a soft chuckle and turned to look at the teachers and speaking up in his usual cheerful tone. Alright, well that will be all for now, you two. Thank you for your time, now off you go. The children can't educate to become great heroes themselves. The principal politely instructed with a kind smile as he got back into his chair and turned it back around to face them. Though they wished to, Eraserhead and All Might did not argue with the polite command of their superior, nodding before they stood up from their seats. Yes, Sir Principal. Both of them uttered before they took their leave out of the principal's office to get back to their duties as hero educators. Once he was sure he was alone, Nezu had taken the tablet back into his paws and he began to go through the entire broadcast once more, watching it more carefully this time around, letting it play through before pausing it quickly at a specific point and zooming it in closer. This specific point he stopped at happened to be the moment before the boy was consumed in the slim tornado. He was eerily silent for a few moments as he examined the image he was looking at. Just who are you, child? He asked with a whisper to no one in particular before letting out a soft sigh. The image was of the green-haired vigilante, having his pleasant moment with the elemental family around his neck, gently clutching the medallion by his chest. A bit of the green glowing gemstone could be seen between the crack by the bases of his middle and index finger. The final detail not going unnoticed by Principal Nezu as he hummed curiously at the glowing gem. And what is that in your hand? Back at the Midoriya household in the early evening. 95, 96, 97 Saio, we were so close. The disappointed voice of the fire elemental echoed from the medallion that was currently resting on top of Izuku's nightstand, the family of gods currently watching the green-haired teen, attempting to do a set of 100 push-ups the mother elemental had tasked him with. Nearly finishing before the boy's limbs had finally given out on him after the 97th push and let out a tired grunt as he collapses onto the floor, lightly panting as he turned his head to rest a cheek on the cool wooden floor. The boy was currently shirtless, showing off a light masculine build, with a pair of gray shorts, giving off a small amount of sweat. His body was different than how it used to be now. He had not found out until last night that the elementals were able to improve his physical strength, stamina and agility by a small quantity. The Celestial Mother explained that it was the reason he was able to move the way he did during his first duty as a hero, or vigilante. Depending how anyone looks at it. The boy rolled over onto his back, panting as he rested the back of his head on the floor, looking down at the medallion that had suddenly materialized around his neck. Animus. Tell me again why. You couldn't just make it easier and just had not done more to improve my body. The boy uttered between his heavy breaths. Oh, my child. If we had done that, there would be no discipline behind it. As the elemental guardian, and as a human being, you must learn that having independence and discipline is important. Besides, even if we wanted to, we would not be able to improve your body more than we already have. We are only able to give your body the slight boost. You do have your free will and it is still your own body after all, not ours. Therefore, it is your responsibility to improve it now. We are merely your guides to help you achieve the ideal results of the improvements at this point. The mother elemental casually explained. Yup, having a strong and durable body is important to have when becoming a guardian. You may wield awesome power, but you can still screw up and get hurt. And having a weak and fragile body obviously will not aid you in getting back up. The water elemental added. Izuku sighed as he nodded in agreeing manner. Yeah, that makes sense. Sorry if I sounded rude about it, Animus. Animus chuckled as she hummed in assurance. No need to apologize, young Midoriya. I enjoy the fact that you are eager to get strong quickly, to be more capable of fulfilling your duty, but you must have patience. Your time as a hero is not limited, so you have quite some time to improve. Not just your body, but your heart, mind and your ability to control the elements and more. Astonishing ways by your bond with us. Izuku perked up at that last statement, sitting up from where he laid and looked down curiously at the medallion. Really? How so? You forget, my child. We are gods that are connected to you, we are what made the elements in your world, so we can manipulate them as we see fit. Since you have all of us at your beck and call, you can do so much more depending on the strength of your bond with us. This may sound silly, but the stronger our bond becomes, the more capabilities you will receive. The teen grinned slightly at that statement, needing to know more about what she meant by having more capabilities. It doesn't sound silly at all, makes sense to me really. By capabilities. What do you mean by that? He asked, the gem going a bright blue as Glasses took it upon herself to answer his question. Well, it's like Mom said, Master. You would be able to use the elements in more unique ways. For example, when using my elements, you could be able to shape ice or snow into objects. You could even make weapons if you wanted to. Swords, cannons, you name it. You could even do it with the others as well. Hell, you could even use the elements to improve your physical abilities when you need to get out of jam. And that's only scratching at the surface of what you could do, Master. The ice and snow elemental finished her explanation with a chuckle. The teen's eyes nearly bulged out of their sockets as immediately, many ideas of how he can wield the elements began to flood into his mind. His grin becoming more excited the more he thought about the seemingly endless possibilities to use his newfound power. Really? Wow. This honestly feels like I'm in a video game, like you're a tutorial telling me I need to level up in order to get stronger. The boy uttered softly as he scratched the side of his head. I'm sorry, video game? The air elemental questioned in high curiosity. Oh, video games are. It's not really important actually. Anyway, I'm wondering that. Would it be possible to even mix your elements together? The boy asked in hope. Animus answering the question. It is as I said, you have all of us within you. There are many possible ways you can wield the elements depending on our emotional bond to you. So yes, you could even do that. What you showed during your first duty was only a tiny fragment of your true power, my child. You still have so much left to show, believe me. This was a lot to process for the young Midoriya, running a hand through his thick locks as he looked slightly in disbelief. Okay, I feel like I'm gonna faint. He awkwardly chuckled, trying to keep his breathing steady and in check, feeling adrenaline from just imagining what he could do to help make the world a safer place. Deep breaths, Master, deep breaths. The sweet, soothing voice of Aurora kindly instructed the Guardian, which was already doing wonders for their guardian. Shade then heard chuckling before speaking up. Don't be leaving us now, Master, don't forget, you have a training schedule to follow. The darkness elemental reminded in a sing-song. That's right. So let's get it together and go out for a run, eh? Ember uttered energetically to the boy now just getting over his excitement, and nodded as he began to get up before doing some stretching exercises in the middle of his room. Yes, ma'am. He responded with an equal amount of energy. The teen feeling more determined than ever to better himself thanks to the elementals. After a minute of his stretching, he moved with haste to put on a shirt and bolt right out of his bedroom door, the fire, ice, and light elementals cheering and pressuring him to get moving, to which he did not disobey. Beginning another tiny step of his journey to physical improvement. Chapter 10. Miracle of Life. Izuku was steadily jogging his way down his apartment home's narrow hallway while humming a soft tune to himself after he had departed from his bedroom, taking only a couple seconds before he had passed through his small wooden doorframe gates that were attached to a door that connected the main area of the home and the hallway that had the bedrooms, bathroom and laundry room. In the kitchen upon entering the main area was Inko, who was currently making dinner for the two of them, steadily stirring rice within a pot while she was humming a soft melody of her own. Hey mom. The green-haired teen greeted his mother in a cheerful tone when immediately noticing her in the kitchen, having jogged his way over to the refrigerator and opened it upon reaching it, the guardian jogging in place while he browsed through the fridge's contents for a few seconds before he reached inside to take out a water bottle. Hey sweetie, how does rice? And Inko's intended question was cut short when she turned her head towards her son, her eyes slightly widened in surprise as she blinked in confusion a few times while she slightly tilting her head. It being the first time she had seen her son doing such a thing in ever. Izuku. She called out softly in a curious manner. Izuku took a quick gulp of his water bottle before letting out a refreshed exhale when bringing it down and twisting the cap back on. Oh, that's good. He commented on the beverage to himself as he wiped a wrist gently on his lips, then steering his attention over to his mother with a smile. Yeah. He replied chipperly, the boy not ceasing his still jogging. Inko continued to look at him curiously, one of her brows raised as she looked up her son for a moment before saying something about his current action. Are you okay? You didn't drop ice down your shorts now, did you? She questioned with a humorous tone. Huh? Izuku looked at Inko with a look of confusion as he slightly tilted his head. He then looked down to his legs, the boy having not even realized how he was moving until it was pointed out. The young guardian internally shrieked as he was quick to stop his legs and go stiff. Then he let out an anxious chuckle as he grinned awkwardly at his mom, while gently rubbing the back of his head for a moment before he responded to his mother. Oh, sorry about that, mom. Inko softly giggled at the slightly embarrassed boy before shaking her head and looking back to continue watching over her cooking. No need to apologize, I was just a bit curious. So, what got you so excited to begin jogging? She questioned as she looked over to Izuku at the corner of her sight, smirking slightly as she continued to stir the rice in the pot in front of her for a few seconds before seizing and putting a lid on top of the pot. Izuku blushed softly as he scoffed bashfully at the question. Well, that's because I was actually about to go out for one. A jog, that is. He replied. That response caught Inko completely off guard as her eyes widened in disbelief at her son, causing Izuku to deadpan and slightly slouch at the look his mother was giving him. And what's with that look? He asked in an equally deadpan voice. Inko recovered from her stupor as soon as her son's question came up, the dark green-haired mother shaking her head quickly for a moment before clearing her throat with a slight smirk, still curved on her lips. Oh, nothing at all. Was just surprised, since you never ever go out jogging. You lazy butt. She stated in a teasing tone as she scoffed. Izuku could not help but grin at his mother's shot at him, letting out a soft chuckle as he shook his head and began to make his way towards the entrance exit of their home. Wow, that's cold, mom, ice cold. He chuckled once more as he began to put on his shoes at the door. Inko giggled softly as she was beginning to finish up her cooking. You know I'm kidding, son, settle. Izuku scoffed as he rolled his eyes, now kneeled down by the door to tie on his shoes. Yeah, I know. He got back onto his feet before he continued, tapping his toes lightly on the floor for a moment and looked back to his mother with a gentle smile. Alright, I'll be back in an hour or so. So just save my plate for later. He nodded to Inko before he began to walk out of the door after opening it. Okay, please be careful, Izuku. Inko shouted out in reply to her son in a worried tone, praying that he would not run into another stray dog situation. Don't worry, I will. He shouted back to assure his mother before shutting the door behind him. After he was out, the pendant of the element suddenly reappeared around his neck, causing Izuku to flinch in surprise, as he had not even noticed that it was gone in the first place. Wait a minute, when did you disappear? He questioned in confusion as he looked down to the medallion. Animus was heard softly giggling for a quick moment before she replied to his question in an amused tone. Well, after you had so carelessly forgot to hide us after leaving your room. We took it upon ourselves to make us invisible, I guess you can say. Izuku flushed in embarrassment as he quickly caught on with what the mother elemental was saying, realizing his own mistake now that she had pointed it out to him. Oh, smart move. He awkwardly chuckled. Sorry about that. He uttered apologetically. Animus gently giggled once more before speaking again. It's quite alright, my child, but you really must remember to hide the medallion if you are ever to go in public. It probably won't take a genius to figure out who you are just from looking at us. So please, be more aware. Izuku gulped as he lightly sweat and nodded before he replied to the elemental mother's instruction. Yeah, I hear you. After his reply, he immediately reached for the medallion on his chest to carefully bring down under his shirt. Again, sorry about that. He uttered anxiously. I gotta say, I like your mom, she has a great sense of humor. Glasses commented, letting out an amused chuckle after she had finished speaking. Izuku himself chuckled at the ice elemental's comment as he shrugged and nodded his head in agreement, now beginning to walk towards the elevator of the apartment building. Yeah. I swear she didn't mean the things she said back there. We like to poke fun at each other every now and then. He replied as he smiled softly. But yeah, she's the best. He added in a soft voice. Well, if that does not show you have a strong bond with your mother, then I guess I don't know what does. Hydran added in with an amused scoff escaping him. Well, it has been just me and her since. He did not finish that sentence as he suddenly fell silent, looking down with a slight frown curving on his lips. Since my. The green-haired guardian was already close to shedding tears just from the very thought of his deceased father. His eyes closing for a moment as he let out a trembled exhale, trying to take a calming breath before he could finish his sentence, but he was not given the chance to do so, as Animus had taken the chance to speak up again and pardon the boy of his statement. You do not have to talk about it if it causes you such pain, my child. We will not press on the matter. We share your pain on what it is like to lose a loved one. You remember that, right? Izuku let out a deep sigh as he nodded weakly with a saddened look, already remembering the night a couple days ago of when the elemental family had told him about the previous elemental guardian, Ayana, and how they had looked to the girl like she was their own flesh and blood. How the parents looked to her as a daughter and the elemental children looked to her as a young sister. Why yeah. I remember. I still feel guilty for having you recall it though. And like I said before young Midoriya, it is quite alright. We have moved on and finished with our mourning. I just hope you can truly finish yours too. But don't take that the wrong way, I don't wish for you to forget about your father. Animus finished with an assuring tone of voice. Izuku looked to the ground as he began to walk into the elevator after he had called it up to his floor, letting out a soft sigh as he shrugged and gave a weak nod. Yeah. Don't worry. I know that's not what you meant. He weakly smiled. I can never forget about my dad even if I wanted to, not that I want to. The boy then pressed the button that would take him down towards the first floor, the elevator doors closing as soon as he did. After the doors closed, Izuku leaned against one of the walls of the elevator. A look of sorrow still in his eyes. Sorry, master. I didn't mean to. Don't worry about it, Hydron, I know you didn't. Izuku replied to put the water elemental at ease. The light elemental then began to speak up after him in a soft, worried voice. Are you gonna be okay to go on the run, master? If you don't feel like it now, we can always just wait till another day. Izuku smiled smelly at Aurora's concern for him, but assured the light elemental with a nod of his head and a hum of confirmation before he replied to her. No. I'll be fine, but thanks Aurora. If there's one thing I know. My father would not want him. Or the memory of him to hold me back from achieving my dreams. So it's okay, I know I can do this. He said in a soft voice of confidence. Attaboy master, that's the spirit. Ember uttered in high spirits, as if the whole depressing mood had not happened in the first place. A response that the Guardian did not take any offense to, but rather his smile got slightly bigger as he appreciated the response instead. Also earning a light chuckle from him. It was safe to say that the fire elemental's contagious confidence was what he needed to hear and feel right now. You definitely have a strong heart worthy to be the Guardian. It was then, the elevator door had opened up and Izuku was quick to recover from his sorrow emotions as he stood straight and began to jog his way out of the elevator. Thank you ma'am. Said Izuku in a voice of a soldier replying to his superior officer. Jogging his way over to the entryway of the property to leave, his determination to improve himself physically having been restored thanks to the Ember. In the elemental world. Anima smiled as she watched their guardian move with a smile on his face, looking to Ember by her side, chanting a tune to keep the boy energized, as she was the one taking the initiative to guide him for the current physical activity. Or rather, all of the physical activities really. Thank you my daughter, I was really beginning to worry there. And yes, you're right. He truly does have a strong heart. The mother elemental thought as she looked back to the aura window that displayed Izuku. Back with Izuku. Izuku had been into his jog for around 25 minutes as he was currently traveling through the sidewalks of a random street. When he was about to pass by a narrow alley, he was quick to bring himself to a sudden stop at the alley when the panicked voice of Aurora softly cried out to him in alarm. Master, please stop. The green-haired teen skidded to a stop on his heels as soon as he heard Aurora, his heart pumping rapidly as the surprise of the cry from the light elemental had him feeling immediately anxious, looking to his chest to where the medallion was hidden underneath his shirt. The teen giving off rapid breaths. What is it? He questioned in confusion as he blinked a few times. She then began to speak up once more in a low, saddened tone. Mother, there's something. Before Aurora could even finish speaking, her mother had already caught on with what had her light elemental daughter so worried as she spoke up before she could continue speaking any further. Yes, I sense it too my daughter. Young Midoriya. She called out to Izuku in a firm tone of voice. The green-haired guardian stood up straight in attention at the celestial mother's call, his body lightly shivering at the life elemental's current voice. Why yes. He replied with a nervous voice. The alley, go into it. Animus softly commanded, which was quick to get a curious and bewildered stare from the elemental guardian. But why? As soon as he questioned the celestial mother's demand, he internally shrieked as he tensed up when Animus was quick to respond in an irritated tone, raising the volume of her voice slightly at him, which aided in making him feel more anxious. Don't ask questions child and just do it. Izuku lightly whimpered for a quick moment as he lightly sweated on his forehead before he nodded and followed her demand without any further questioning. Right away ma'am. He responded in a nervous voice as he did what he was told, making his way steadily into the alley. The alley having a couple trash cans in it, as well as a large dumpster that was against the right wall in the middle of the alley. Behind the dumpster, hurry. There is not much more time left. Animus urged the boy. Izuku did not say anything in response as he felt there was no need to do so, not wanting to frustrate the mother elemental more than his stalling has already did so. He was now jogging his way over to look behind the dumpster. His eyes widened in horror as he let out a soft gasp at what he saw was laying right behind the trash object on a flat piece of cardboard. Oh my god. he said in shock as his right fist came up to cover his slightly gaped mouth. What met his sight as soon as he looked around the corner of the dumpster was a small, malnourished, and dying white cat that had small bits of its fur gone from some areas of its body. The feline was currently laying on one of its sides as it took slow, raspy breaths with its eyes closed. The cat looking like it was close to nearing its last breath. "Mother. It's dying," Atmos commented in a low, sorrowful voice. "I know my child, young Midoriya." Animus once again called out to him urgently, which was quick to bring the green-haired guardian out of his shock trance as he shook his head and looked down at his chest as he replied to Mother Elemental. "Why yeah?" Izuku questioned nervously. "I need you to take the creature into your arms right away," Animus commanded him once again in a firm tone of voice. Izuku's eyes narrowed curiously down at the medallion shaped through his shirt for a few seconds, having a slight frown on his lips as he then looked back to the kitten with a guilt-stricken gaze. But Animus, it's gonna die." Animus once more spoke up urgently to interrupt his sentence, not wanting to hear what the boy was about to say, and just hoped he would stop questioning her demands. "Young Midoriya, I deeply apologize for this, but I need you to be quiet right now, trust me and just do as I say. Now pick up the cat right now, please." Izuku's eyes widened in surprise and immediately felt fearful at the life elemental's sudden roar at him. His body tensing as he gulped when looking back down to his chest. Hearing the celestial mother's voice sound desperate. Not needing any more pressuring from her than that, Izuku got rid of his hesitation as he quickly moved to kneel down right by the cat, his hands carefully approaching to gently take the dying feline into his arms to cradle it. An aching pain striking his heart when he heard a low, pained mewl come from the animal, his lower lip quivering as he bit down on it with an anxious look on his face. "It feels as light as a feather," he commented in a low, soft voice. Immediately feeling guilt that he had even considered leaving the poor creature initially. "I'm such a fool," he thought in soft frustration towards himself. "Mother, please hurry." The fire, ice, snow, air and light elemental children uttered in a panic after they had heard the pained mewl from the creature. "It's not gonna last much longer," Ember added after her and her sister's cry. Animus was quick to respond to her daughter's plea. "I know my children, please stay calm." She then began to talk to Izuku once again. "Okay, thank you young Midoriya. Now, just hold the creature close to you and I'll do the rest from there." The mother elemental instructed the guardian in a more calm tone of voice now. Izuku gulped as he nodded in compliance. "Will do," he softly replied as he looked down to the white-furred kitten. Taking a calm breath before he lightly embraced the poor creature in his arms, his thumb lightly stroking the top of its head. "What now?" he asked as he looked down to his chest. He received no voiced response from the elementals, but instead got a different kind of response. His eyes widened as he let out a surprised gasp, as suddenly his body had began to emit a bright white and sparkling aura. Hearing a light hum echoing in the alley that was coming from him, or more specifically the aura that was coming off of him. He looked to the white outlining of his body in shock and astonishment, confused, yet absolutely amazed with what was happening with him. "What's going on?" Before he could finish his thought though, his sights had once again set on the white creature in his arms. What he saw was happening to creature now left him absolutely speechless, and his jaw slightly dropped as he let out a soft trembled gasp. The cat was now slowly losing its skeletal thin figure as its muscle was beginning to become replenished to make its body look more normal. Its pure white fur that was lost due to its condition was beginning to grow back quickly. The creature in its entirety was slowly becoming to look as good as new. There was one astonished thought that immediately came to Izuku's mind after he had processed what was currently happening with the creature in his arms. She's healing it. Chapter 11. Shocking event. I never imagined seeing something this amazing. Izuku thought in awe as he was admiring the elemental mother's work occurring in his very arms. The white-furred feline having just been pulled away from death's door when Animus had brought life back into its body. The cat now looking unscathed and as good as new when the goddess was finished with it. The sparkling aura that was around the green-haired teen had slowly faded away into nothing to signify the healing process's conclusion. "It is done. Thank goodness. I feared we would have been too late." The mother elemental uttered in relief before she was heard sighing with the same emotion. The elemental children could be heard sighing in relief as well after their mother before Ember had spoke up to Animus. "You're as awesome as ever, Mom." The fire elemental said in a chipper tone as the sound of clapping could be heard for a couple seconds. "That was far too close," said the worried voice of the light elemental child after her sister of fire had finished speaking. Animus hummed softly in content at her daughter of fire's compliment before she replied while also acknowledging her daughter of light's comment. "Thank you my child. Indeed, that was rather too close for comfort." She then cleared her throat before she began to speak to their astonished guardian once more in an apologetic tone. "I deeply apologize for my behavior towards you earlier young Midoriya. I was just awfully anxious at the time. Young Midoriya. Izuku was pulled out of his stupor when he had heard the mother elemental call out to him. The green-haired boy's eyes blinking rapidly a few times before he shook his head to get himself completely back to reality. Then looking down to the medallion before he responded to her. Huh? Oh, it's no problem at all, Animus, so please don't apologize. He replied with an anxious chuckle escaping him while awkwardly smiling before he continued on. If anyone. It's really me that should be the one apologizing to you all. His voice then lowered in volume and sounded dispirited with his next words as his awkward smile curved into a slight frown. I'm the one that turned my back on her while you all desperately wanted to help. So I don't deserve those words. Heh, that was not very guardian-like of me, was it? Upon hearing Izuku's downcast response, there was a pregnant silence between the elementals and their guardian, all 9 of them feeling an emotional pain in their beings when hearing his words along with his tone. Animus then broke the silence once more. Please, do not punish yourself for that, my child. You do have every quality of a guardian. I am the one at fault for not informing you of my own powers' capabilities. I do not doubt that if you did know about them, you would not have hesitated to save the feline's life. So yes, it is I that is at fault and should be apologizing to you for my ignorance. I hope you can forgive me. Izuku sighed while he shook his head and hummed in denial after she had finished speaking, smiling smelly when he had stopped his head motion. Well, I'm just as guilty there, Animus. It's not like I asked about your powers either, which are amazing by the way. So, as long as you forgive me, I'll forgive you. He asked with a chuckle and a slight grin, as he then looked down to the furry creature he was still cradling in his arms. The snow-white cat was now breathing normally and showed no more signs of pain as it slept comfortably in the green-haired guardian's arms. After a brief silence when Izuku had finished speaking to the elemental mother, a soft chuckle was heard coming from Animus before she responded to him. I assume you are not gonna back down from taking any blame for this, are you? She asked in a humorous tone, which made Izuku scoff as he held in a laugh, and his grin momentarily extended more upwards. You better believe it. He responded confidently as he then began to stand back up from where he was kneeling on the ground in the alley. After hearing a sigh come from the celestial mother, she replied once again. Very well then, I guess you got yourself a deal. She giggled softly before she carried on. You are forgiven. Then you are forgiven too. He immediately responded with a smirk, then bringing up the important subject of a certain feline that was currently in their presence, as he looked to the creature with a concerned expression. So, what do we do about this little goo? Girl. He scoffed nervously at the verbal mistake he nearly made. I mean, I honestly don't think I would be able to leave it out here like this after we had pretty much just brought it back to life. I'm gonna go ahead and assume that she doesn't have an owner since she doesn't have a collar on her and was out here in such a bad condition in the first place. So, my only conclusion is that she's a stray. He said as he then looked to his chest with a curiously lifted brow, waiting patiently for Animus to say something on the matter after his last question. You, got any ideas? Animus softly hummed in a thoughtful manner for a couple seconds before speaking. Well, why don't you just the mother of the elementals was not able to finish her response when suddenly her daughter of fire had blurted out a response of her own to their guardian's question. Ooh, I know what we can do. Izuku slightly flinched when hearing the loud volume of the fire elemental's voice, but chuckled as he then responded as it sounded to him like she was waiting for him to give her permission to speak, almost like she was student waiting for her teacher to let her answer a math or whatever subject really question with a high level of enthusiasm. Okay Ember, what do you got? Immediately after acknowledging the ecstatic fire goddess. She was heard humming in glee before she replied in an excited tone of voice. Let's keep her. A couple claps were then heard after Ember had spoke, as Aurora had spoke out her immediate thoughts on her fire sister's suggestion. That sounds like a grand idea. Please master, can we keep her? The light elemental cutely pleaded as Izuku could only picture her pouting with that request. I think I would appreciate having her around as a pet to keep us company. It has been a long time since we had one after all. Said the air elemental as she added in her 2 cents on the matter. How could you not appreciate her? I mean, just look at the little cutie patty. Who can possibly say no to her? The cheery voice of Glasses uttered after her sister of air had finished talking. I think it would have been better if it was a black cat. Shade could then be heard mumbling for a brief moment before Animus had spoke up to silence her children. But noticing her elemental daughter sounding incredibly insistent on the suggestion, the mother elemental was quick to speak up and suppress her children's enthusiasm as to not let them overwhelm their guardian. That is quite enough, my children. She said firmly, which was a success on silencing her young ones. She softly sighed before carried on, sounding more calm this time around. I was just about to suggest the same thing. But ultimately, it is up to young Midoriya to decide whether or not he will take the creature in as a pet or not. So we must not force him to take on the burden if he does not wish to. After she had finished speaking to her children, Animus then spoke up to Izuku again with a question. Well, young Midoriya, what will it be? Remember, you are not being forced to do it. Our response was merely a suggestion. Nothing more. After hearing that, Izuku's face began to lightly sweat as he anxiously bit at one end of his lower lip. A worried expression appearing on his face as there was just one, or maybe two, big problem in the way of that decision if he were to accept the suggestion, and he knew that what he was about to say next was sure to upset the elementals. He deeply sighed before speaking up. I don't think I would be able to do it even if I did wanted to take her in. Don't take this the wrong way, everyone. It's not like. He went silent for a short amount of time as he looked at the cat with a depressed expression, evident that he was also not looking forward to what he was about to say. It's not like I want to turn her away. I would love to take her in if it was possible. But it's my apartment, it has a strict no pets allowed policy to it. So I can't just go and take it in so casually, like there's no consequences behind that decision. If it were to be found out that she was living there, I would be forced to give her up and take her to an animal shelter or something. And I would prefer if it did not have to come to that. After hearing the Guardian, there was a pregnant silence between them all after Ember was hurting, letting out a downcast "oh." The atmosphere then turned depressing and awkward as none of them had any clue of what to say to combat his statement. And it did not take much more than that response from the fire goddess for Izuku to figure out that the elementals were upset with what he had said, just as he had predicted they would be. And suddenly, what sounded like one of the elementals snapping their fingers was heard before Aurora was the one to break the awkward silence, as it seemed she had solution to that issue when speaking to her mother. Why don't we just do what we did with Silver, mother? After the light elemental had said that, the elemental daughters were quick to be heard supporting that proposal. Oh yeah, that's right. Let's do that. Please, mother. Ember was then heard begging to their mother about whatever it was they were hoping to happen. Izuku looking to his chest with his eyes narrowed in confusion, as he had no hope of deciphering what it was they were even talking about. I honestly had forgot that we did that after so long. I suppose I am not opposed to doing that again either, since this one is a much smaller and more gentle creature than Silver was. Admo said in a more compass tone of voice than the rest of her sisters. Yes, yes, yes. That would be awesome. What do you say, Mom? Can we do it again? Glasses questioned their mother in excitement as Izuku could picture the ice elemental jumping in glee as she asked. The mentioned elemental guardian still looking down to his chest with a more bewildered look as he became more baffled by each second that had passed when he did not get the specifics of their current suggestion. Animus was heard sighing before a gentle chuckle had escaped her, and she gave a response that immediately earned happy cheers from her more expressive daughters. I don't see any reason why not, it certainly worked with Silver. Yes. The ice and fire elemental said in unison with a light hiss. You're the best, Mom. Ember cheered. Oh, thank you, Mother. Said Aurora as she could be heard clapping her hands together chipperly for a moment. Thank goodness. Admos could be heard whispering as she let out a quiet sigh of relief. Izuku chuckled nervously as he took his turn to speak up to question what they were suggesting. The green-haired teen was awfully eager for an explanation at this point, as the confusion was beginning to give him a weak headache. I'm sorry, but I don't quite understand what is going on here, so. Any one of you mind filling me in? The Guardian asked with quiet scoff as he awkwardly grinned. Animus being the one to answer his question immediately after he finished. The elemental of life then cleared her throat before acknowledging their Guardian's question. Well, we do have an idea that may aid you on making your decision a little bit more easier. That response immediately had Izuku lifting a brow curiously as he blinked a few times in surprise. Okay then. Let's hear it. He said softly with a shrug as he looked a white-furred cat with a weak smile. If it means that it will allow me to keep her, I'll do anything. He said softly in confidence as his left thumb came down to gently rub up and down along the cat's head. The animal then began to purr in its surprisingly deep sleep when feeling his caring touch. The reaction causing Izuku to grin as he admired the adorable nature behind it. See? What did I tell ya, master? Like I said, she's a cutie patootie. Glasses commented with a gentle chuckle. Izuku chuckled as he nodded in agreement to the ice-snow elemental's statement. Yeah, I know she is. Back to the important subject, Izuku looked to his chest at the hidden medallion under his shirt to give Animus his attention. Anyway, go on, Animus. Thank you. Well, what we were thinking we could do is that we go for the second time in the last few minutes, much to her slight frustration. The mother elemental was interrupted from speaking when someone else had spoken up before she could finish presenting their idea. But what surprised Izuku, and even the family of element gods, was that it was not any one of them that had interrupted her, but rather it was an unfamiliar voice that belonged to what sounded like a teenage girl, and the mentioned teenage girl's voice was heard coming from directly behind the green-haired guardian as he felt a few light taps strike at his shoulder. Excuse me, are you okay? Quickly after feeling the taps and hearing the girl's voice call out to him, he, along with the elementals as they did not even sense this person approach the boy, yelped as he held the cat firmly to his chest before he jumped back a couple feet while spinning around to face the sudden intruder of their conversation and out of instinct, stuck out his left open hand towards her. Whoa. Hold on there. The unexpected girl exclaimed as her body immediately went immensely tense while holding her hands up by her shoulders. Now looking anxious as she quietly gulped and she expressed her desire to cause no harm to the green-haired boy. When getting a good look at the girl that was now in front of him, it was definitive that she appeared to be around Izuku's own age. His eyes widened as he softly gasped when seeing that it was a rather attractive girl at that. She had fair skin, large teal-colored eyes and long orange hair that was tied into a ponytail by the left side of her head and went down to the middle of her back. She wore a dark blue short-sleeved blouse, navy jeans and black Converse with white laces on them. In the elemental world, the gods and goddesses of the elements were currently gazing into the aura window that overlooked their guardian in front of them in absolute shock. Their wide eyes comically widened as their jaws were dropped by what they were seeing. It was not the orange-haired girl's sudden arrival that had them so surprised anymore, as that was only very short. But rather it was now what was going on with Izuku's outstretched hand. Please tell me that I'm not the only one seeing this, Ember uttered in a stunned manner. Mother, are you seeing this? Hydran asked in a similar tone to his sister of fire to the elemental mother, none of them daring to take their eyes off the aura window. How is this even possible? Galva commented to himself in a baffled whisper, the lightning emitting from his body beginning to spark erratically for some unknown reason even to him, as he always had it under control. I am, my son. Animus replied, her now being the first one to break away from her mesmerized state as she blinked a few times and steadily shook her head. Then she looked over towards her son of lightning as she began to ask him a question that related to the sight that had them all comically stunned. Galva, did he call to you? With his mother having broken the elemental of lightning out of his stupor, he looked down to his sparking way more than usual body as he gasped in surprise and could be seen trembling. What the? He uttered anxiously as he observed a mysterious display he was giving unintentionally. My son, did he call to you? Animus asked again, this time in a slightly more demanding tone as her eyes narrowed at him. Hearing his mother's tone, Galva looked to Animus as he then shook his head in denial before answering her question in a frantic tone. And no, mother, I swear he didn't. There were two reasons why the elemental of life was asking her son of lightning this certain question. One of those reasons was that she, and evidently the rest of her children, did not hear their guardian call out to Galva, and the second, well, that is to be explained if one were to see what they were looking at through the aura window. Animus brought a hand up to her chin as she looked down and thought for a brief moment as she mumbled to herself. If he did not call to you, then that could only mean. Her voice trailed off as her eyes slowly widened once more and she let go of her chin before looking to the mentioned aura window in utter shock once again. It can't be. This has never happened before. Then a delighted grin slowly began to creep its way onto her lips before she continued. Just how are you doing this, young Midoriya? Back with Izuku. Right now, there's no need to start using our Q quirks for no reason. I'm not trying to start a fight. I swear I didn't mean to startle you. So let's just. The orange-haired girl gulped as she lightly sweated while biting down lightly on her lower lip shortly. Let's just calm down, alright? She requested nervously as her hands were gesturing for him to ease up while they remained close by her shoulders in surrender. Izuku felt his heart stop for a short moment when the realization had finally hit him and his sight steered down away from the girl and to his extended outwards hand. His pupils dilated as he let out a trembled gasp of amazement by what he had apparently did on his own. Flowing out from his fingertips and palm, and also up between his fingers rapidly, was lightning that had formed a ball made out of the said element an inch in the front of his hand, the ball ready and waiting for him to send whatever attack it was he desired to send out. But there was a specific detail that was different about the lightning he was giving off than when he did during his first duty as a vigilante hero. Instead of the element being in a violet color, it was now being emitted in a bright green color this time around. When getting over his stunned state of mind, Izuku huffed as he then quickly clenched his fist in hopes of stopping the lightning from coming out any longer, which the action did successfully, as the emerald electricity had dissipated with a final crackle of the element heard when his fingers went down into his palm and the alley fell silent. On seeing that her life was not at risk anymore, the orange-haired girl let out a deep sigh of relief as her face also expressed it. her arms lowering to briefly fall limp by her sides as she momentarily slouched. "Oh, thank God," she whispered to herself as it felt like the huge painful weight of the whole ordeal had been lifted off her shoulders. Holding his left hand close by his gut over the CAD in his right arm, his fingers slowly opened up so he can look into his palm with a startled gaze. Due to the overwhelming shock of what he had just done a few seconds ago, his breathing was going at a slightly fast rate, as his body was even shaking a little. He gulped quietly as he began to telepathically question the elemental of life in an anxious voice, as he was very sure he did not call to the lightning god in order to summon his power. His body just acted on impulse. Animus. What just happened? Chapter 12. The first connection. What the hell just happened there? Izuku internally questioned himself as he was looking down at his left palm in disbelief. His fingers were shaking without his control, understandably so after he had processed what he had just done not that long ago. A mixture of emotions were currently storming within the green-haired boy's being. Emotions such as excitement, confusion, astonishment, and maybe even a hint of fear. They have summoned Galva's lightning seemingly by his own will and even unintentionally changing its color to fit his more nautical facial features. He did not know how to feel about the whole situation. For a moment there, it felt like he had just manifested his own personal quirk. I cannot explain what went on at this current moment, young Midoriya. But we will worry about that later on. For now, you must focus on the one in front of you. Anima strongly advised the guardian before falling silent on him, sounding firm about the instruction. But I have so many questions now. Animus. Anyone? After receiving no response from any of the elementals, Izuku sighed as he determined that they must have cut off their communication with him, or they are ignoring him for now. The boy lightly biting down on his lower lip anxiously, curiosity now being all the boy could feel as these answerless questions were gonna bug him for a while now. He even began to mutter to himself. The orange-haired girl that was in the alley with him looked at him in a worried manner as she noticed the bothered expression on his face and obviously the muttering, but he was speaking at such a quiet volume that she could barely make out a single word he was saying. She now began to speak up to make herself known to him once again. Hey, you alright there? Look, you don't need to be so worried about what just happened. It's alright, really. The girl said as she scoffed nervously and awkwardly smiled, waiting patiently for the guardian to respond to her. Izuku then snapped out of it when the girl's familiar voice brought him back to earth, looking to her with blinking eyes. He had forgotten that she was even there due to being a bit too far into his thoughts, even when the mother elemental had reminded him. The girl's head slightly tilting to one side as she managed to transform her smile into a more normal one when their eyes met. Huh. Oh yeah, I'm so sorry about that. He chuckled nervously as his left hand scratched at his cheek, and he looked down in shame that he even made such a threatening action towards an innocent girl, something he never thought he would do in his lifetime. I didn't even notice you coming, so my body just went on alert on its own for a moment there. His face flushed as he quickly explained. Wow. He dumbly thought as his gaze admired the girl's figure from bottom to top. He then realized what he was doing before briefly shaking his head to get his mind out of the gutter. The orange-haired girl scoffed as she held back a chuckle, shaking her head as she made a denying hum, and her smile brightened. Like I said, it's alright. So you don't need to stress about it. Besides, I did just sort of come up on you out of the blue. So I can't really blame you, now can I? She responded with a shrug as her smile turned into a pleasant grin. Heck, I could have even been a villain for all you know. Izuku was surprised with how her attitude seemed to have shifted to a comfortable and positive one in the matter of seconds. The boy gulping in subtle manner, he was not all that used to talking to a cute girl so casually. For a rather plain-looking guy like himself, it was rare that he would even converse with one in the first place. The only times he would talk to girls, in a formal and professional manner, was when he was helping the female customers with their purchases and bidding them farewell at his workplace. Izuku awkwardly scoffed at her last comment as his hand lowered from his cheek. I guess that's what my body was thinking. He cleared his throat before continuing to talk. Anyway, what brings you down here, Ms.? He asked as his blinked before his eyes narrowed curiously at the girl. It's Kendo. Itsuka Kendo. But, you may call me Itsuka if you wish. I'm not too keen on the whole being called by my last name thing. You know what I mean. The girl, now known as Itsuka Kendo, introduced herself with a nod of her head and her grin remaining curved on her head. Itsuka Kendo. He processed the name in order to place it within his memories, hoping that he would remember it for the future if their paths were to ever cross again. I see. Yeah, I hear you. And as for why I am here. Well, I was just about to walk by till I saw you down here, and I couldn't help but become curious as to why you are. She then looked to the furry white creature that was still being carried in his right arm, and her grin went back to a smile. But I guess now I know. she finished as she looked back up at the green-haired boy. Oh yeah, heh, I found this little one down here, and I just couldn't. Izuku had suddenly stopped talking when he had looked down at the white feline in his arm. His eyes widening as he was stunned to see the cat's pair of red eyes gazing back at him. Oh. Hello there. He uttered out softly as he had brief awkward stare down with the cat. The cat then quietly mewed as it yawned before purring as it started to snuggle against the boy, and its tail moved to hang off along the side of his forearm. Obviously it was more than comfortable where it was and did not intend to move anytime soon. Not that Izuku minded anyway. The adorable creature forcing a smile to appear on his face as he watched it. What do you plan to do with her? Itsuka asked as she was able to determine that the cat was obviously a stray, frowning slightly as she was agitated and wondering just what kind of horrible person would even think of abandoning a cute creature such as itself, if it did not run away that is, but she could not help but wonder that. She was lucky to have not seen its earlier condition before Animus had desperately replenished its life force. She then took the initiative to close the distance between them so she can get a closer look at the lovable feline, stopping a foot away from the guardian while bringing her hands together behind her, and she slightly leaned forward. She obviously has taken quite a liking to you already. She softly chuckled as she looked up at him. You really think so? He responded with a rising tone of hope, but when he looked up at her, he was surprised to see that she had gotten closer to him, causing Izuku to tense up for a short moment as a faint blush flared on his cheeks when their eyes met. If her getting that close and comfortable is not any indication, then I don't know what is. She scoffed out of amusement as she leaned back to stand straight. So knowing that, are you gonna take her in? When processing all that Itsuka had said, Izuku looked back at the cat with a thoughtful expression and began to think about the option. Well, Animus did say that they had a plan. Trusting the elementals, he did not ponder on the matter for much longer as he had come to a definite conclusion. His smile returned as he adored the relaxing feline for a moment longer before looking back up at Itsuka and answering her. Yeah, I think I will when you put it like that. He quietly chuckled, the thumb of his left hand coming to the creature's head to gently caress it. Thank goodness. Itsuka thought as her face showed a relief, having felt worried for a second there at the thought of him saying no. If she had the choice to take the creature in herself, she would do it in a heartbeat. But that was not possible for her to do so, since she lived with 19 other people, and she lived on the property of UA High. She knew for a fact that pets were not allowed within the Heights Alliance dormitory, even more so on school grounds. That's great to hear. She uttered gratefully. She was unable to fight back against the urge any longer, as her right hand slowly came out from behind her back, while her left hand remained there, and she attempted to try and pet the feline. But she halted before she could as she looked at Izuku with a hopeful look and a small smile. You wouldn't mind if I pet her, would you? She asked in a surprisingly flustered manner, the girl unintentionally closing the distance between them by a few inches. Oh, of course not. Go right ahead. He responded in a flustered manner as well, moving his left hand out of the way so Itsuka's own hand was clear to show affection to the cute furry animal. The cat once again purring when it felt Itsuka's gentle and caring touch, causing the orange-haired girl's heart to flutter, and she nearly squealed in delight when it started to rub itself against her fingers. It looks like she has taken a liking to you as well, Itsuka. Izuku commented as a small smile curved on his lips. She is just so darn cute. She responded in a cutesy voice before they both then shared a small laugh. Do you have any idea on what her name is gonna be? Itsuka asked as she continued to pet the cat, resuming to make soft cutesy comments here and there. And no, not yet. I never had to think up a name for a pet since I never had one before. And I'm not really good at thinking on the spot. So that may take some time. He bashfully replied. Itsuka nodded. Yeah, I can understand that. Just try to make sure it's a name that is just as adorable as she is. She giggled as she finished with her petting, much to the kitten's disappointment as it mewed while looking up at the orange-haired girl. Itsuka feeling her heart break as she could see the emotion in the creature's eyes. Oh, I'm sorry little gal, I promise I'll give you much more petting when we see each other the next time. She said with the utmost confidence and guarantee as she gave it a quick yet gentle scratch under its chin. Yeah. I will. Izuku looked at Itsuka with a surprised gaze as he was caught off guard at how genuine she sounded with her promise. She's grown that attached to her, huh? He thought, but then again, who could blame her really? She must be a big cat person if she is willing to go that far to see her. Would that be okay to do one of these days? The orange tea suddenly asked the guardian, finishing up her scratch before putting her fingers in the pockets of her jeans and looked to him. If it won't be too much of a bother, that is. Izuku felt like he was put on the spot with that question. If he were to agree to her request, then that could only mean that. Izuku blushed furiously as that meant that he would probably have to exchange contact information with the girl in order to arrange such a meeting. He had never done that before. The only female that was in his contacts was his mother. Wow, he is just now realizing how sad that sounds for someone his age. Why did he not sooner? Well, I got to break out of my shell one of these days. So today might as well will be that day. He thought, as he could not let this kind of opportunity go to waste. Plus, he felt that the more active elementals would probably be all up on his case if he were to say no to her. Taking a deep breath, Izuku managed to maintain a calm enough composure to answer the girl in a kind voice. Why yeah, that would be fine. I think that it goes without saying that she would definitely like to see you again soon as well. He shyly chuckled, his body and mind feeling a bit more at ease now that he answered. Huh, that wasn't all that bad. He thought as he felt surprisingly calm now, having expected his anxiety to only grow when he agreed to it. Does that mean that you have to get going now? He asked as he looked to her curiously now. The orange tea sighed as her head lowered slightly while nodding. Even though she did not wish to leave so soon, she had to get back to the dorms for some much needed study time now. Having been out and about in the town to get some fresh air, but mostly to get away from her crowded and rowdy household for a little while. Since the late evenings is where it was calm enough for it to have even a little bit of peace and quiet around there. Yeah, I got to be getting back home soon before it gets too late, or else some of my roommates will probably freak out if I don't. She softly chuckled as she scratched the back of her head. She then suddenly made a look of realization. I just realized that I haven't gotten your name yet. Heh, sorry about that. I could be a bit of a dunce sometimes. She said bashfully with a faint shade of red dusted on her cheeks. It was when she had pointed it out that Izuku had realized the same thing. Oh no, don't blame yourself. He quickly shook his head. I should have introduced myself after you did, so that really makes me the dunce here. He awkwardly laughed as he gently bumped his left knuckles on his head out of embarrassment. The white feline currently looking back and forth between the two teens in confusion as it clearly did not know what was going on, letting out a soft mewl before it went back to doing its own thing again and pressed against the green-haired boy in a peaceful state. Hey anyway, my name is Izuku Midoriya. He introduced himself after his laugh. Upon hearing his name, Itsuka's mind immediately began to wander. Midoriya. I swear I heard that name before. But when? She thought as she looked to the ground with a curious expression while holding onto her chin. On seeing the face she was making, the green-haired guardian's head slightly tilted as he was quick to become confused. Is something wrong? I didn't say anything wrong, did I? He asked in a worried voice, afraid that he might have said something that had somehow baffled the orange tea in any way. Though he was having trouble seeing how he could have done that in the first place, all he did was tell her his name after all. Snapping out of her thoughts, Itsuka shook her head as she raised it to face him. Oh no, nothing like that. It's just that. She was about to explain her reasoning behind her previous demeanor, but she suddenly decided against as she felt that what would be the point if she can remember where she heard his last name before. Never mind, it's not important. Anyway. She then cleared her throat and pulled some strands of her hair behind her right ear. I should probably be on my way now. Izuku was sort of disappointed with her response, but he would not press on the matter as he did not want to irritate her by doing so and take up any more of her time. Oh, okay, well. Making the first move, he had to take a deep breath to calm himself before he reached into his left pocket to fish out his cell phone and flipped it open when getting it. Giving the girl a weak smile as he slightly waved the device in front of him. So should we he exchanged numbers? He asked with a flushed face and a gulp afterwards. If you want to, that is. Heh, no pressure. Jay just thought it would be easier that way for the three of us to arrange a get-together when you want. Or as something of the sort. Itsuka looked down at his phone for a second before looking back at him and she flashed a comforting smile to the boy. Seeing no reason to decline the blatantly harmless boy suggestion, she reached into one of the back pockets of her jeans to take out her own cell phone. Sure, that sounds like a plan, Izuku. Is it okay if I refer to you by your first name? She asked nervously. Izuku nodded immediately after she asked. Why yes, you're more than welcome to. He responded with a small smile. Scoffing in amusement at his somewhat energetic answer, Itsuka nodded as well. Well alright then. The two then began to trade their phone numbers and list each other's names into their contacts, Izuku's hand fumbling here and there as they did as he struggled to hide a grin that threatened to curve on his lips. Oh my god, this is really happening. I'm getting a girl's number. Izuku internally squealed as he felt surprisingly excited about this. If he were a couple years younger, he honestly thought he would have fainted long before they even made the exchange. Okay, maybe he is exaggerating a little bit and not giving himself enough credit with that thought, but he did not doubt that he would have probably been a nervous wreck about it. Alright, you got all that? Itsuka asked as she glanced over at Izuku's phone, lifting a brow as she waited patiently for a response. Izuku pressed on the phone's buttons a few times before he then closed it and put it back in his pocket after making sure he had got all the information put in correctly. Why yeah, just finished. What about you? He asked back. Itsuka hummed in confirmation as she continued to keep typing on her phone in obvious discretion. Yup, down to the last detail. She responded. Okay, I guess whenever we both have the time and you want to pay her a visit. We are just a phone call or a text message away now. He advised while flashing her a small smile and a shrug, but then he hummed curiously when suddenly he felt his phone vibrate repeatedly, indicating he was receiving a phone call after the orange-haired girl had stopped pressing on her phone and she looked up at him with a smirk. To which Izuku did not notice. When he checked his phone, he saw the caller ID was a number that he did not recognize. Normally, he would never answer the calls of unknown numbers, but his instincts were telling him that this was an important caller. Hello? He uttered once answering the call while looking confused. He then heard an amused giggle coming from both the girl in front of him and the caller, which only confused him more for a brief moment until it finally dawned on him when hearing her speak. Okay good, I just wanted to make sure you didn't give me a fake number. Itsuka said in a playful tone as she was now holding up her phone to her ear as she eyed Izuku in a smug manner. When realizing it was her, Izuku chuckled softly at her remark. Heh, I thought that was supposed to be the guy's line. He responded as he attempted to sound humorous about it. It kind of worked as he managed to get a chuckle out of the orange tea. The two then ended the short-lived call and put their devices back in the pockets that they took them out from. Well, I'm sure you'll be hearing from me soon. She chuckled as she looked to the cat to pet it once more for a few seconds. I honestly don't think I can be far away from this cutie for too long. She smiled as the feline leaned into her thumb as she brushed it against its head repeatedly. See you around pretty, she said to the white-furred animal before taking her hand away. It was nice to meet you, Izuku. She extended her right hand between them. Oh, and I hope you intend to let me know when you have given her a name. She added with a lifted brow and a smirk. Izuku nodded quickly. It was a pleasure to meet you as well. Itsuka. And I'll do that. He then chuckled anxiously as he began to move his left hand for it to meet the orange teas. Though, I only hope I can come up with a name that fits her cuteness. Their hands met as soon as he finished talking. The moment the two teens' skin had come into contact with one another, Itsuka's eyes then widened, her mouth went agape, and she released a sharp gasp. It was as if her whole being had been transported somewhere else entirely, and where she ended up, all she could see was fire. The flames were so bright and raging beautifully. Yet, they did not deal her any pain or distress. Instead, they were calming her, making her feel powerful. Wait. There is someone, or really what she thought was something, in the flames. Was it a monster, a fire demon? Whatever it was getting closer to her. She could begin to make out womanly features. A shapely, dark orange body, long flailing hair of fire blowing up behind her. Its face. It looked so shocked. Like it was just as confused and surprised as Itsuka was to see her. Wait, it was Ember. Itsuka was then sucked out from wherever she was, and her tensed body instantly felt an arousing heat course throughout her as she released a soft and sudden moan. The orange-haired girl feeling every bit of her strength dissipate and she felt herself falling forward. She was only falling forward for not even a second as she felt herself stop and also someone wrapping their arm around her waist to catch her as she leaned on whoever it was that caught her. Then there was a familiar voice that was slowly bringing her back to reality. Hey. Itsuka. What's wrong? Hey, are you okay? The familiar voice questioned her, clearly out of worry. What? Itsuka quietly replied to whoever the male was that was talking to her. The orange tea finding herself breathing heavily as she was holding onto the male while leaning her forehead on his left shoulder and her face having a dark shade of red on it. The enticing heat disappeared on her and she felt her strength steadily return as she began to take in her surroundings, seeing that she had returned to the alley. Then her gaze slowly steered up to the person's face that was holding her. It was like she had forgotten who she was in the alley with the moment she felt like she had become enveloped in flames. Izuku. She softly uttered as she saw the green-haired boy looking back at her in a flustered state. Their soul windows gazing deeply into each other with the brightest of blushes appearing on their cheeks. Their faces being just a few inches away from touching. Izuku shifted the right side of his body back to protect his new pet from Itsuka's sudden fall towards them, having her lean against the left side of his body with his free arm around her. When she had finally processed how they were positioned, a slow and shaky gasp forced its way out of the orange-haired girl as her eyes slowly widened. Embarrassment was all she could feel at that very moment as she began to think about just how obviously strange and bold she must have looked when she collapsed on him. Are you alright? Izuku asked her once more. Both of their bodies were frozen as they both struggled to break the somewhat intimate lock their eyes had on each other. I'm fine. Itsuka dumbly uttered before she then regained some of her composure, shaking her head, and she quickly backed off of the green-haired guardian and took a few steps back. Hey anyway. I'm gonna go now. See you around Izuku. She said in a rushed awkward manner as she turned around and began to swiftly walk away from the boy while remaining a blushing mess. Leaving a silent and bewildered Izuku alone in the alley once more as he just watched her walk off. See you. He whispered as she went around the right corner, his hand raising as a feeble attempt to wave goodbye. Then the mewling of the white cat snapped him out of his stupor and caught his attention a couple seconds later. Meeting its red eyes when he looked down. Why yeah. I have no idea either. He sighed as he slouched. You think she's gonna want to call us after all that? He asked a feline with an awkward chuckle as he rubbed his head, receiving only another mewl before it purred, while snuggling him again as its reply. Izuku scoffed, the animal's efforts earning a warm smile from the boy as he began to stroke her head with his thumb. Yeah, maybe she will still. We can only wait and see. Little did the green-haired teen know, the flame symbol on the medallion hiding under his shirt was dimly lit. When she turned the corner of the alley, Itsuka maintained a fast walking pace as she put her hands in her pockets, facing the ground with her hair shadowing her eyes and biting down on her lower lip anxiously. What in the heck did I just see? And why? Did I feel like that all of a sudden? Chapter 13. Destined Blessings. In the home of the elementals, immediately after Animus had cut off their communication with Izuku. The elemental family was silent for a few tense moments as they were still trying to process what had happened when Izuku had, somehow, took full control of Galva's power and used it as a means of protection. His body having moved on its own to threaten Itsuka with electrocution when she had decided to make her presence known to him, much to Izuku's and the elemental's surprise. Finally, Glasses was the one to break the awkward silence occurring in their home when she had gotten over her dazed state. Okay. Now I think I speak for all of us when I say this, but what in the hell did Master do just now? Glasses obnoxiously asked as she pointed over towards the now mute aura window that was displaying Izuku's current interactions with Itsuka. I don't got a single clue. Oh, on how to explain that. Galva stammered as he was looking down at his shaking lightning hands. The much more than usual erratic sparking on his body having settled down to its previous calm state. His eyes were nautically wide. His shock of the whole baffling, yet frightening and amazing, occurrence evident on his face. Whatever that was. I don't think it is something that we should simply ignore and forget. We will have to ask the master about it later on when the right opportunity presents itself. Said Atmos, as her and Slate were the first ones to compose themselves well enough to appear somewhat collected. Her brother of Earth nodding as he grunted in agreement. Oh, you don't say, Atmos. Shade said sarcastically, his sister of air having pointed out the obvious. His remark earning an irritated growl from Atmos as she aimed a harsh glare towards her brother of darkness. Jerk. Atmos muttered. Does anyone remember the previous masters ever doing something like that? Aurora asked curiously as she looked over at all of her siblings with her head being slightly tilted. Her mind drawing a blank on the matter. Because I can't seem to recall it myself. She added lowly, frowning as the whole issue was now starting to bug her as she strongly hoped that her memory wasn't failing on her. For a few seconds, the elemental children were now shooting bewildered glances at each other. As if they were expecting one of them to remember something like that happening in the past. Through the many millennia that they have all lived through, not one of them can recall a similar event happening with any of the previous guardians before Izuku. They were innately hoping that it has just been so long that they can't remember it right away. But that was not the case at all. I got nothing. Hydra nervously answered his sister of light's question as he shrugged, his own mind also drawing a blank. Yeah, me neither. Ember responded in disappointment. The others then responded with words that were similar to what the fire and water elemental had said. Having finally reached his breaking point, being more freaked out about the event than any of them would have thought he would be. Galva loudly groaned in frustration as he gripped his head tightly for a brief moment before looking towards Animus frantically. Gah. I can't take this anymore. Mother, PL, please tell me that you have a theory that could rationalize what went down. The elemental of lightning cried out as he yanked his hands down in front of him and curled his fingers down halfway. Mother. He called to Animus again, much quieter this time around, when he hadn't received a reply from her. Animus was currently looking down to the grass, while her body was still facing the aura window directly in front of her. Her eyes were closed as she had a rather intense look on her face. Her children knew that look. So it could really only mean one thing to them. That they were not to disturb her while she was having a telepathic conversation with their father. Exos? Are you there, my love? The mother elemental softly called out to Exos within her thoughts. Her hands coming up to hold each other at the front of her waist. Now waiting patiently for a reply from her husband. I am here, my darling. Exos calmly responded a few seconds later. The sound of his voice causing Animus to smile as she could never get enough of hearing what was most definitely the best music to her ears. I swear, every time I hear your voice. It is like you are casting a spell on me that I could never break free from. Animus internally giggled. Maybe that is the case, or maybe it is not. It certainly does not sound like you are trying to complain about it though. Exos chuckled. Animus's smile got slightly wider as she softly scoffed in amusement, holding back a giggle after Exos' humorous remark. I have no reason to deny that fact, she replied. Of course you don't, said Exos before he released an amused scoff of his own. Before Animus would go ahead and try to discuss with the elemental of creation about what had happened with Izuku and their lightning son's power. She first wanted to say one thing to Exos. I love you, she internally declared with a gentle tone. Even though she wasn't able to see it, she knew that her words were successful on making her beloved smile fondly down at her from above. And I love you, my beautiful soul. Exos declared in return with a gentle voice as well. If she had a heart like all of the humans did, it would be wildly beating at her chest right now at the moment she had heard Exos refer to her by the nickname he had come up with for her since the day she was created. A nickname that she loved hearing him call her by with every ore of her being. Now, putting lovey-dovey words and feelings aside for now, she wished to get to the subject that had her and their children deeply concerned. Her serious expression had returned before she started to speak to Exos with an equally serious tone. Please tell me that you saw what we all have seen. How could I have not? I will admit, even I was startled by what had happened. It was rather unexpected to me as well, to say the least. Exos replied, knowing full well what was on the mind of his beloved since they were connected. As long as they were communicating with each other in such the way that they are now. They were both able to see and hear what was going on within one another's minds and thoughts. Or to simply explain what that meant, it was like they were sharing a single mind. I have a good guess on what that could mean. But I just wish to hear what you think about it first, if it is not too much to ask of you. Animus replied almost dubiously. I apologize if it is, my love. She added bashfully. Exos softly chuckled at the tone used with her words. It is no trouble in the slightest, my darling. Animus felt relieved thanks to his response. Exos hummed curiously before falling silent for a few moments. Well, after seeing what young Midoriya had accomplished. Exos paused again, making Animus lift a brow in wonder. Then the sound that it came out of him next had the life elemental utterly confused and a bit startled. The creation elemental suddenly started to burst out laughing, almost hysterically, when he broke his silence. The laugh going on for a few seconds before he settled down. I'm sorry. I failed to see what you find so funny, Exos. Animus broke her dumbfounded silence as she questioned Exos when he had eased his laughter enough, almost sounding kind of annoyed, surprisingly. I apologize. Exos replied before he made the sound of clearing his throat. I just could not help but think that young Midoriya may just be our most unique guardian yet. No offense to his predecessors, of course. Animus agreed with that statement as she shrugged and slightly nodded her head. I certainly cannot disagree with you on that, especially after what just happened. She smiled smelly, fully supporting her husband's thought. But that is not exactly the opinion I was hoping to hear. So, back to what you were going to say. She urged him. Right, well. It appears that our current guardian has done what the previous guardians have not been able to do. Please be more specific, my love. If you would be so kind. The boy has, in some strange and baffling way, made Galva's power his own. Summoning it by his own will, and not by our son's. His body seemed to have manipulated the lightning's features to match his own. In terms of the lightning's color, that is. I suppose channeling the lightning to the front of his palm was his body's choice of a defense attack. And from the looks of it. Green really must be young Midoriya's color, not that I am complaining. It does fits him rather well. Exos finished with an impressed tone. I am glad to know that we were thinking the same thing. Animus giggled. Of course, greats mind do think alike after all. Exos confidently replied. What do you suppose we do now? Should we be worried about this? Animus asked him, her voice sounding awfully unsettled. Do not fret, my lovely soul. Exos said with a comforting tone to Animus. No, I do not think that this is something we need to be afraid of. Quite the opposite, in fact, if you take a moment to truly think about it. His voice then started to express joy at a quiet volume. This actually could be something that can potentially benefit us, as well as humanity, greatly in the near future. Young Midoriya most of all. Animus perked up when hearing what her husband had said. Her eyes opening as she blinked a few times in a short-lived stupor. Care to explain why you think that? She asked in a bewildered voice. Think about how easy everything would become, my love. If the boy was able to properly control the powers that we have granted him on his own. He would not need to keep calling to you all to know what element he would wish to use when trying to fulfill his duties. He would not need to lose that little bit of time and focus that he could possibly need during a more complicated and hasty predicament. It is even more important that he has full control when he is able to use more than one element at a single time, once the strength of our bond with him becomes powerful enough. It could also even make our inevitable battle with him. He said the last word with strong hesitation and a soft growl. Animus frowned as she looked sorrowful because of that last word, knowing exactly who her beloved was talking about. Much more winnable. Exos then started to sound discouraged and heartbroken. I would very much rather he not take another guardian, another beloved child of ours, away from us. Each and every time he claims their lives, I drift more and more away from the side of hope. So much so that I have been beginning to think that we will never be rid of him. That the suffering and torment he deals to us after each fight will never come to an end. That is why this has to be the final conflict between us. The end of our seemingly everlasting war with him. I sense that Izuku is our best hope so far if we can get him to control the children's power. He will be the strongest guardian that fate has chosen for us yet. Can you see it now, Animus? Do you understand? Animus tightly squeezed her hands together as she was silent for a short duration of time. Her lips pursing as she started to think about all of their children that they had lost at the hands of him. I understand. She responded after she had eased her frustration when pulling her mind out of such sad and frustrating thoughts. I am sorry if I had sounded irrational, dear. Exo sighed. It just breaks me to think of us having to lose everything again. I know what you mean, darling. I feel exactly the same way. After we had lost Iana, and I apologize for not bringing it up sooner. But that was when my own faith had began to dwindle. She said sadly. I had such high hopes that she would be the one to finally put an end to his games. She scowled as tiny bits of ore in the shape of tears had started to fall from her pure white eyes and roll down her cheeks. And we would finally be free. I am sure that we all thought she would be the one to do it. She had proved to have been quite a challenge for him to take down before her demise. Exos replied dubiously, the latest word causing Animus to weakly flinch. Why yes. I miss her, Exos. I miss them all. So much. As do I, my dear. As do we all. Before the celestial parents would travel further down the painful side of memory lane. They were saved when the unsettled voice of Hydron had quickly pulled them out as he had called to Animus in alarm. Hey mother. You may want to take a look at this. The water elemental strongly urged before he gulped as him and his elemental siblings, all except for one of them, were taking a few cautious steps back away from their flaming sister as something strange, or crazy as it seemed like a more appropriate term, was presently happening with Ember. Without bidding her husband farewell for now as she was forced to quickly break the link with him. Animus quickly turned around to face her children in a startled manner. What is going on? She then gasped as she froze on the spot when she had seen what exactly was going on with the fire elemental. What is happening now? Animus uttered silently, almost in complaint, as she was now seeing Ember levitating a couple feet off of the ground while a small spiral of fire was blasting off into their world stratosphere. Her legs pressing together as her arms were slightly stretched outwards and her chest was pushed forward. Her hair flailing about behind her. The fire elemental had a blank expression plastered on her face as she was facing upwards towards the sky, looking to be in some sort of weird trance that she could not break. Within the realm of fire. Wah. Oh no. Where the hell am I? Ember internally questioned in confusion as she found herself floating somewhere that had nothing but her own element surrounding her. Her head slowly turning side to see nothing but fire everywhere she looked. Okay. This definitely isn't home, that much is obvious. Well, there must be a good reason to why this is happening, I hope. There freaking better be. She paused after she let out a heavy sigh, her eyes then narrowing slightly. HMPH. I'm surprised that I ain't freaking out right about now. This does seem like something that I should be losing my crap over, isn't it? It was true, despite knowing where she was and not knowing one bit on how she got there. She, for some weird reason, did not feel any sort of fear or unease. She had no motivation to complain whatsoever. Rather than that, she instead had the opposite effects. This place, wherever this was, made her feel right at home as a matter of fact. Like this realm was where she belonged. This was where her home was. This was her domain. She of course knew where her real home was, with her family, so she would not dare forget that. She felt so relaxed, so clear-headed, and so much more powerful than she had ever felt throughout her entire existence. Where has this place been all of her life? But, I think I can see myself chilling here from time to time. If I can find my way back to the fam, that is. She scoffed with a small grin as she closed her eyes briefly when looking straight ahead. When she had opened her eyes again. A surprised gasp forced its way out of her mouth, and her wide eyes widened as she could make out what appeared to be a person off in the distance ahead of her, and the individual was slowly floating towards her. Then again, so was she, and she couldn't bring herself to move her arms and legs to save her own life when she had tried. The person looking to be having the same issue as well. Who was that? When she and the other person had gotten close enough, their view on each other became clear. Holy crap. Isn't it that girl who Master was talking to? She exclaimed as she had locked her startled sights on the person who was indeed Itsuka. It is. What is she doing here? She questioned in bewilderment as she could not pry her eyes away from Itsuka's own. Just as she was about to try and talk to the astounded human girl, everything suddenly went white for Ember, and she had been swiftly pulled out from the fiery realm. Back to reality. Ember? It is me, your mother. Please, speak to me. Animus pleaded desperately with the levitating, burning body of Ember, as her and the other elemental children were still gazing warily at the blazing fire elemental. Why yeah, you are really freaking us out here sis. Shade complained nervously. Finally, Ember's body released a sharp and sudden gasp as she had came back to her senses. The fire spiral that had engulfed her bursted and dissipated almost instantly before she fell forward onto the ground, grunting when she had impacted the grassy floor. She then weakly groaned as she started to recover while lying down. Ow. That wasn't a fun trip at all. Ember pouted as she pushed herself up to all fours and brought her right hand up to rub her now aching head. Damn, what is this pain? She asked no one in particular. She then looked around after her face had briefly scrunched up from the pain. I'm back home. She dumbly spoke as she could be seen blinking a few times. Ember? Are you alright sweetheart? Animus in her natural motherly voice asked Ember as she quickly came up to her and knelt down beside her on her right, bringing her hands up to lightly hold onto her fire daughter's shoulders to try and help her up while giving her the time to better recover. Her other children quickly coming up close to surround them after Animus had approached Ember. I think so. Ugh, my head is just killing me now. Ember groaned in answer for her mother as she started to try and get back up on her feet. Of course, she was not literal about what she had just said at that last bit. Do not push yourself, my daughter. Take your time. Animus instructed in a gentle tone as she continued to aid Ember. Just when we thought this day couldn't get any stranger. Galvas sighed as he glanced down at his figure. Geez, you really had us on the edge of our seats for a minute there, Glasses said anxiously. I swear, I almost felt myself begin sweat. Hydrant complained, almost sounding disgusted. Never thought that would be possible. He added. What happened there, sister? Aurora asked a rather obvious question that was on all of their minds. Yes, surely something must have happened. Animus added in a worried tone, having finished helping Ember get back up on her feet, the fiery female now standing up in a somewhat stable manner. I actually got no idea. It was like I was here one moment and the next thing I knew, I was suddenly taken to somewhere else entirely. Ember answered as she continued to lightly rub at her head with one hand while visibly wincing. What exactly did you see? Atmos asked in concern. Fire. I saw absolutely nothing but fire everywhere. Ember paused as she was not quite done talking yet. And I wasn't alone there. She revealed. Everyone, excluding Ember, were momentarily surprised by the reveal. It doing nothing to rid of their immense confusion. Okay. Who exactly did you see? Shade asked. That is when Ember looked up towards the aura window close by them. Her left hand rising up to point at it. Her family's gazes following her point. From the medallion's point of view, it showed the moment that Itsuka had started to nervously walk away from Izuku at a fast pace to leave the alleyway, and it was Itsuka who the fire elemental was pointing at. Her. There was a brief, stunned silence between them all of them having difficulty processing what Ember had just said. Are you sure? Animus asked with a curious tone as she narrowed her eyes at Ember. With utter certainty visible on her face, Ember nodded as she remained looking at Itsuka until she was out of the aura window sight when she had turned at the right corner of the alley. Then she looked towards the life elemental. Yeah, I'm positive it was her, Mom. There's no mistaking it. She replied confidently. At this point, the pain that was occurring in her head had already subsided. I see. Well, if you are alright. I must have another word with your father. Animus advised firmly as she started to walk away to create some distance between them and have some privacy once more before she would converse with Exos again. Ember quietly hummed in response as she nodded her head, preferring that her mother do that. If anyone could possibly explain to them what that kind of event was, it would most definitely be her father. I really hope we don't come across any more weird surprises. At least not surprises that affect me. Ember thought in mental exhaustion as she let out a deep sigh that emitted a tiny, short-lived cloud of her flames. Then again, being in that place did feel pretty awesome. She finished with a small smile. It appears that we are not done having unexpected situations occur, my love. She spoke to Exos after she had repaired their earlier broken link. I cannot believe it. He is the first guardian. To ever be blessed with this. Blessed with them. Fate, you have finally chosen. At long last. They may be just who we need to have more of an edge in the battle. Exos cheered out of nowhere. Now what in the living universe took you so long to do this for us, eh? He then angrily complained. Animus's eyes were in the shape of wide saucers, as she had never heard the creation elemental sound so astonished, chipper and furious all at the same time before. It really made her feel uneasy. What are you talking about, my love? Who are they? Animus hesitantly asked, only to receive silence from Exos in response for a few seconds. Exos. She softly called to him. Then finally, he answered his wife after releasing a giddy chuckle. Be prepared, my dear. For when we find the rest of them, and we will. Izuku and our children will have to be their guides. What do you mean by that? Please tell me who they are already. Animus demanded out of frustration, the response only working on confusing her even more. Our new warriors, Animus. If one can see him right now. They would be witnessing the sight of the father elemental grinning widely. Young Midoriya's destined ones. And with those words alone, Exos now had a lot to explain to his family, especially to their 8 children. That's it guys. With that, we've reached the latest chapter. Take care.